My sister suffered a heart attack and passed away despite emergency efforts. On the day of her burial, her unhinged lawyer ex, the prince of Beijing's elite circle, and a Yandera top celebrity showed up at my door. Upon learning of her death, they snapped on the spot and were ready to dig up her grave and desecrate her body. I stood in front of her grave, pleading desperately, "Respect the dead. If you're angry, take it out on me instead." I was forced to become my sister's stand-in and subjected to their relentless humiliation. They beat me until I was bruised and battered, then forced me to film all sorts of unspeakable videos. After barely managing to escape, I tried to bring them to justice. A ruthless lawyer threatened to ruin my reputation completely. The Beijing elite's golden boy applied internal pressure, leaving me with nowhere to turn for help. A Yandera top celebrity released the video, claiming I deliberately seduced him. I became the central figure in a sex scandal, with my reputation completely ruined. My parents even publicly disowned me through a newspaper announcement. I went home to confront them, only to overhear my sister's gloating voice. If it weren't for Mom and Dad faking their deaths to escape, I'd never have gotten away from those lunatics. Thank God for that idiot Lena, otherwise I would have been the one in that sex scandal. Completely shattered, I stormed into the house ready to take my sister down with me, but ended up being killed by our parents instead. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day my sister had her heart attack. My poor Tessa, you were only 20. How could you just die like this? How could you leave Mom and Dad behind? How are we supposed to go on without you? The doctor regretfully announced that Tessa had not survived the resuscitation efforts. My mother collapsed into my father's arms. Weeping uncontrollably, I watched this farce unfold with cold detachment, sneering inwardly all the while. In my past life, I was completely taken in by her masterful acting, convinced that Tessa had truly died despite the rescue efforts. Not only did I endure my mother's abuse, but when those three lunatics tried to dig up the grave and desecrate the body, I stepped forward to protect my sister's remains. I was terrified that my parents, already reeling from the pain of losing their daughter, would suffer another devastating blow, but in the end, my parents helped Tessa fake her death to escape, giving her a brilliant future. Meanwhile, I was thrown to the wolves, endured endless torment, and was ultimately killed by my own parents and left to rot in the wilderness. At that thought, I rushed forward and dropped to my knees with a thud in front of the emergency room doors, raising my voice. I shouted toward the inside of the emergency room, "Don't you worry, little sister. I'll take good care of our parents for you. If you ever miss Mom and Dad, just send them a dream. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to join you down there." My mother's wailing suddenly cut off as she turned to glare at me with pure venom in her eyes. "You wicked girl, how dare you say such things? You're the one who's going to hell." My father also looked at me disapprovingly. Who in their right mind curses their own parents to die early? You must have a death wish. I desperately forced out a few tears, looking at my parents with profound anguish. "You've doted on Tessa for 20 years, always giving her everything she wanted. How could you not even honor her final wish?" My mother was left speechless by my words. My dad finally managed to mutter a stiff denial after a long pause, wiping tears from my face. I choked out a promise to my parents that I'd give Tessa a proper, dignified funeral. I've already posted about Tessa's passing on social media. I'm sure our relatives will be here soon. I'll make sure Tessa gets the send-off she deserves. Nothing less than perfect. As I spoke, I pulled out my phone and dialed the funeral home. My mother turned pale with shock, rushed over, and knocked the phone out of my hand. "Who said you could call the funeral home and delete that social media post right now?" My parents' phones started ringing one after another. All calls from people offering condolences after hearing about Tessa's passing. I couldn't help but laugh at the sight of my mother's flustered expression, unable to voice her distress, thinking of helping Tessa fake her death in this lifetime. Dream on. After barely managing to deal with all the relatives, my mother completely lost her composure when she saw me about to call the funeral home. She dropped to her knees with a thud, her raised voice drawing curious glances from people in other hospital rooms. "I'm begging you, just let your sister rest in peace. We don't want a lavish funeral for her, and we certainly don't want her to be used as a tool for you to make money." As she spoke, my mother kowtowed to me 3 times, each time with a heavy thud. She was crying so hard, tears and mucus streaming down her face, that anyone would have thought she was the most devoted mother. The onlookers chimed in with unsolicited advice, urging me to respect my parents' wishes, while some even resorted to sarcastic remarks. "Your sister is already gone, and you're still trying to squeeze every last bit of value out of her. What a modern-day skinflint. You won't even spare your own sister. Your parents wasted all those years raising you." Clutching my chest, I took a few steps back and stared at my mother in disbelief. I just wanted my sister to have a dignified farewell. What did I do wrong? She's my own sister. Why would I ever do anything to harm her? Moved by my heartfelt words, Everyone changed their tone and urged my mother to let Tessa go with dignity. My mother was overwhelmed by their pressure and couldn't even muster a word of refusal. But if we actually give Tessa a grand funeral, there's no way to fake her death and escape. Just as my mother was caught in a dilemma, my father stepped up. He made the final call and decided to hold a low-key funeral. He put it in high-sounding terms. The funeral procedures back in our hometown are too complicated. Who has the time for all that? Let's just keep it simple with a private memorial among ourselves. I smiled in agreement, then immediately turned and grabbed the doctor who had just emerged from the emergency room, speaking with utmost seriousness. My sister had previously registered as an organ donor. As her family member, I respect her wishes. Please check which of her organs are suitable and transplant them all. The doctor's eyes lit up, and he grasped my hand. Expressing profound gratitude, he moved quickly, immediately presenting the organ donation agreement for me to sign. My mother was so startled she slid off the hospital bench and stumbled over to stop me. She snatched the agreement and tore it to shreds. Suppressing her anger, she snapped irritably, "Who gave permission for organ donation?" "Tessa is my daughter," and I said no means no. I opened my sister's organ donor card on my phone and held it up in front of my mom. This was a decision Tessa made on her 18th birthday. We have no right to disagree. The doctor chimed in as well, even explaining the law to my mom right there in front of everyone. My mother was completely against organ donation and refused to consider it no matter what. She even lay down in the middle of the hallway and threatened the doctors. "If you dare to harvest my daughter's organs, you'll have to step over my dead body first." Among the onlookers was a family member waiting for an organ transplant, and seeing the opportunity right in front of her, she wasn't about to let it slip away. She burst out of the crowd, tearfully guilt-tripping my mother. "My son is only 8 years old and waiting for an organ transplant. All our family's hopes rest on you." People around us tried to persuade my mother, telling her that organ donation saves many families and she shouldn't refuse, but since my sister wasn't actually dead, my mother naturally couldn't agree to organ donation. She had no intention of causing her daughter's death. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably, yet she refused to give in. No matter how much the other party tried to guilt-trip her, her response was always the same: "I won't donate." Seeing that there was little hope, the other party slunk back into the crowd. My mother, like a triumphant rooster, scanned the room and then turned her fury on me. "Tessa is your own sister. How could you wish for her to die in such a wretched state?" I couldn't help but laugh bitterly inside. My own sister, the same sister who tried to send her own sibling to an early grave. In their past life, Ryan and the other two showed up on the very day Tessa was buried. Chapter 2. My father used taking care of my sobbing mother as an excuse to hide, leaving me alone to face them. When they found out Tessa had played with their emotions, they had her grave dug up and her body desecrated on the spot. Even in death, Tessa will pay the price she deserves. Like a fool, I stood in front of Tessa's grave, telling them to direct all their anger at me. I was forced to become Tessa's substitute and bear the brunt of their rage. First, they beat me until my skin was torn and flesh was exposed, leaving no part of my body unharmed. Then they forced me to film all sorts of unspeakable videos. That period felt like living in hell. I barely escaped with my life and tried to bring them to justice, but it was all in vain. First, lawyer Phoenix threatened me: "We could crush you like an ant. Don't waste your efforts, or I'll ruin your reputation." Then Ryan, the so-called crown prince of Beijing's elite circles, applied internal pressure with his casual remark: "She's a pathological liar." I was left with nowhere to turn, and was even detained by the police for a week on charges of obstructing official duties. I thought I had hit rock bottom, but it turned out that was only the beginning. Top celebrity Leo publicly released the video he forced me to film, claiming I had deliberately seduced him. His team pushed me into the trending topics and even hired trolls to flood the comment sections of major influencer accounts. Calling me a well-known socialite in the industry, I became an overnight sensation, only to have my reputation ruined, and now I have to watch my back on the streets for fear of being attacked. The moment I saw my parents publicly disown me in the newspaper, I finally realized I was nothing but a discarded pawn. In the background, my mother was still stubbornly refusing to sign the organ donation consent form. I couldn't help but wonder, if I were the one about to donate my organs, would she still argue so vehemently? She'd probably sign without a second thought, saying it's my good fortune. My father gave the doctor an ingratiating smile and pulled him aside to whisper something. All I could see was my father making a hand gesture to the other person. The doctor didn't bring up the organ donation matter again, which made my mother breathe a sigh of relief. She shot me a murderous glare. "Take Tessa home first. Just wait till I deal with you later." I watched the hurried pace toward the morgue, a smirk playing on my lips. I hoped Tessa could keep her composure and not slip up in front of the relatives once we got home. Before we even reached home, I could see our front door wide open from a distance. My mother frowned and demanded, "Didn't you lock the door when you left?" We had just parked when, before my mom could rush into the house, relatives swarmed around us. My father looked at the relatives in surprise, clearly annoyed by their unexpected visit. Why did you show up out of the blue without even giving us a heads up? Grandma's cane came down hard on my father's leg. She shot him a glare and snapped, Tessa is my own granddaughter. How could I not be here? The other relatives chimed in, all talking over each other to blame my parents, while also pointing out the funeral setup. As they spoke, they went ahead and began moving Tessa's body out of the car. My parents watched with bated breath, terrified they might catch on, but had no good reason to refuse. I heard someone mutter, the recently deceased really are different. Still warm and everything. My dad broke out in a cold sweat, frantically took Tessa, and headed straight for her room. I called out to my dad, the wake is in the living room. Why are you carrying Tessa to her room? My uncle thought my father was so overwhelmed with grief that he'd even forgotten where his own living room was, and insisted on taking over for him. The moment he took over, Tessa fell heavily to the ground. I caught a glimpse of Tessa's brows furrowing slightly in pain, but she didn't dare cry out, gritting her teeth to endure it. My mother watched helplessly as Tessa fell, her heart nearly leaping out of her chest. If you can't handle it, don't push yourself. You're going to hurt Tessa. How could a dead person feel pain? Don't joke around, sis. My dad, afraid that Tessa's fake death would be exposed, quickly covered for my mom, seeing that no one was suspicious. My dad hurriedly placed Tessa on the funeral bed, worried that something else might go wrong. My aunt suggested hiring a mortician for Tessa, but my mom vetoed the idea. That's for making up the dead. How morbid. Absolutely not. My aunt looked at my mom strangely, but Tessa has passed away. If she were still alive, who would even suggest getting a mortician? My aunt glanced at Tessa lying on the funeral bed, her confusion growing deeper. Lena, you don't think you got a misdiagnosis from some quack doctor, do you? Maybe Tessa is still alive. While saying it was impossible, I wasn't idle with my hands either. I went straight for the most painful spots with full force. Dead people can't feel pain. I'll know for sure with one pinch. Tessa turned pale from my pinching, her whole body tensed up, but she didn't dare furrow her brows. My mother shoved me aside with force, like a mother wolf protecting her cub. I watched Tessa take her last breath with my own eyes. There's no way she could still be alive. You're just trying to take advantage of her, and I won't let your dirty scheme succeed. I let out a long sigh and said, Mom, can you please stop making a scene here? She's my own sister. Nobody could be happier than I am that she's alive. My mother stood guard in front of Tessa, grumbling and refusing to budge no matter who tried to persuade her. My aunt spoke up for me, saying I meant well, and other relatives also tried to talk some sense into my mom. Watching my mother's unreasonable behavior, I pretended to give in. You're absolutely right. Let's just pick a day and get Tessa buried as soon as possible. My mother, afraid that delays might bring trouble, didn't even consult the almanac and insisted on holding the burial tomorrow. Although our relatives thought the timing was too rushed, they still agreed to my mother's request. That evening, my parents volunteered to keep vigil for Tessa, saying they wanted to accompany her one last time. I stood outside the door listening to Tessa complain to our parents. Lena pinched me so hard, my hand is all bruised and it hurts so much. Wah. My mom looked sympathetically at the fingernail-sized bruise on Tessa's arm and promised with full confidence that I would get what I deserved. I took out my phone and sent a text to the pinned contact. I've sent you the address for Tessa's burial. Don't be late tomorrow. After putting away my phone, I watched the harmonious family inside and smiled silently. I hope you'll be smiling just as happily tomorrow. The next morning, my father proposed laying Tessa to rest to help her escape this world. I hurried over to my parents, putting on a troubled expression. Cremation is mandatory now. I've even arranged for the hearse from the funeral home. My dad had planned to go along with the mistake, intending to let Tessa escape on the way to her supposed cremation. His plan seemed perfect, but the moment he opened the door, he was completely stunned. A large group of mourning relatives stood outside the door, glaring disapprovingly at my father. Luckily we had the foresight to come early, otherwise just the three of you wouldn't have been able to handle everything. We also want to accompany Tessa on her final journey. I tried to persuade my father. Dad, at least let everyone come to the funeral home to say a final goodbye to Tessa. My father broke into a cold sweat, knowing that agreeing would be a death sentence for Tessa, seeing the house filled with mourners. My mother grew even more determined to insist on a traditional burial. She plopped down on the floor and threw a tantrum like a hysterical shrew. I refuse cremation, it has to be a burial. Trying to get Tessa out under everyone's watchful eyes is next to impossible. Only a traditional burial offers a glimmer of hope. Chapter 3. My relatives spent ages trying to talk my mom around, but it was all for nothing. I let out a sigh, looking utterly resigned, then let Tessa rest in peace. Now everyone can finally pay their respects. My mother couldn't refuse any longer and had to reluctantly agree. People accompanied Tessa's coffin the entire way, leaving my parents no opportunity to offer any last words. They could only write a note and secretly slip it into the coffin when no one was looking. Since our hometown doesn't allow traditional burials, we had to find a random spot on the barren hill near the cemetery. By the time we arrived, out of breath, the auspicious hour was nearly over. Missing the auspicious hour is bad luck. If we don't bury our sister soon, it'll ruin the feng shui. The moment Grandma heard it would affect the family's feng shui, she couldn't stay seated any longer. She directed her relatives to dig the grave. Just as they were about to bury Tessa, I glanced at the time. The auspicious moment had passed. A sinister voice rang out from nearby. Who gave you permission to dig graves and bury bodies here, consumed by guilt? The group frantically swung their shovels to restore the dug-up area to its original state. Terrified of being caught for the illegal burial, they packed the soil down so tightly that Tessa was left without even a breath of air. By the time they arrived, the ground had already been returned to its undisturbed condition. The relatives, mistaking them for park staff, smiled and made light-hearted excuses to brush off the situation. But I recognized them instantly, the three lunatics who had condemned me to hell in my past life. The moment they saw me, they instinctively cried out, "Tessa!" Before I could even retort, their gaze shifted to the tombstone I was holding, and their eyes instantly reddened. Gnashing their teeth, they snarled, "Dead, don't think for a second that death will make me forget what you've done. I'll dig up your grave and desecrate your corpse if I have to. But you will pay for this today." My mother's face turned deathly pale the moment she saw the three of them. Tessa leveraged her looks to flirt with multiple men, and whenever she found a promising catch, she'd even share the details with my mom. Clearly, my mother had seen photos of all three of them before. My mother pretended to be a quail on the sidelines, and my father didn't dare to step in and stop it. The three of them waved their hands, and the crowd behind them swarmed forward, ready to dig up the grave and desecrate the corpse, but our relatives wouldn't have it. "What did Tessa ever do to you? Can't you even let her rest in peace? Don't you understand the respect owed to the deceased? You look decent on the outside, but you're worse than animals. Anyone who dares to dig up Tessa's grave today will have to go through me." They brandished their shovels, blocking the path in front of Tessa's grave. Suddenly, a rhythmic tapping sound echoed. I pointed at Tessa's grave, my face full of disbelief. "This voice seems to be coming from here." Tessa screamed from inside the coffin. "Help, I'm not dead. Whoa, I don't want to die. Dad, Mom, let me out of here, quick." Everyone was frozen in place, too terrified to move, their faces a mix of shock and disbelief. And suddenly screamed, "Could it be that Tessa's corpse reanimated because we missed the auspicious hour?" Her words sent chills down everyone's spines, and no one dared to rescue Tessa. The crowd shuffled nervously, but no one dared take a single step closer to Tessa's grave. Ryan sneered, "Are you all in cahoots with Tessa, putting on some kind of show?" He cast a skeptical glance at everyone present, while relatives protested their innocence, trying to clear their names. Someone mustered the courage to confront Ryan, demanding to know who they were and why they harbored such hatred for Tessa that they would desecrate her grave. Upon hearing the question, Ryan burst into laughter. "Well, we all used to be Tessa's boyfriends." The moment these words were spoken, everyone chimed in unison. "No way, Tessa has never even been in a relationship." Tessa had always been the picture of innocence around them, so much so that even telling a simple lie about never dating seemed impossible, let alone three-timing. Seeing the disbelief on their relatives' faces, Leo kindly handed them a stack of photos. Every single photo featured Tessa, but each time with a different man. He pointed helpfully at the timestamp beneath the photo. She wasn't just dating the three of us, she was seeing all these men at the same time. The crowd flipped through the photos, checking the timestamps, and erupted in an uproar. In just 2 years, Tessa had managed to date over a dozen boyfriends. Phoenix adjusted his glasses and said coldly, "She's been playing us for fools, but we're not pushovers." My father hatched a plan and mustered the courage to confront Ryan and his crew. "You can't just claim something's true and expect us to believe it. Photos can be faked, you know. If you're so capable, why don't you rescue Tessa and have her confront you herself?" Ryan saw right through my father's little scheme and shot him a look of utter disdain. "I still have that video of your daughter. Should I make it public?" Chapter 4. You think reverse psychology works on us? Don't kid yourself. My mother, driven by maternal instinct, tried to rush forward to save Tessa but was held back by Phoenix. Phoenix stared at Tessa's grave with shadowed eyes, his words dripping with cruel indifference. "Isn't she already dead? Then she should just stay dead." My mother, terrified that Tessa would be smothered to death, pointed at me and knelt before Ryan, begging desperately, "She's Tessa's sister, hasn't even been in a relationship once. I'm willing to trade her for Tessa. Do whatever you want with her, you can even kill her if you like. Just let Tessa go, please." The moment my mother finished speaking, the room fell silent. Relatives condemned my mother's actions, mocking and ridiculing her. Phoenix cleared his throat and sternly rejected my mother's proposal. "Every grievance has its source, every debt its debtor. We don't make a habit of implicating the innocent." Ryan looked me up and down, remaining silent for a long moment. My mother broke down emotionally, screaming at me and demanding that I sacrifice myself, heartbroken. I looked at my mother, clutching my chest as I backed away. I'm your daughter too. Why should I be the one to clean up my sister's mess? My mother snorted coldly, her eyes filled with icy detachment. After all these years I've raised you, it's only right that you do this for Tessa. My father agreed with my mother, but he stated it with unwavering conviction. Parents' orders and matchmakers' words. We have the right to decide for you. Ryan frowned and coldly rejected my mother's proposal. Seeing that my mother still wanted to plead her case, he spoke up, "Say another word, and Tessa will die in her own grave." My mother immediately fell silent. The standoff continued as Tessa's cries grew fainter, the sound of her pounding against the coffin nearly inaudible, her voice hoarse and choked with tears. She begged Ryan and the others to rescue Tessa. "If we don't save her now, she's going to die." After exchanging glances, Ryan and the two others finally took pity and ordered someone to dig up Tessa's grave. The moment Tessa was rescued, her face was deathly pale and she remained unresponsive no matter how much we called out to her. My mother threw herself over Tessa, weeping and wailing, begging everyone to perform CPR on her. The relatives were terrified that Tessa might be a reanimated corpse and didn't dare to help. Ryan and his crew actually wanted Tessa dead, so they naturally ignored my mother's pleas. Who knows if she's even alive or dead? If you want it done, do it yourself. My mom had no choice but to step in herself, but her technique was all wrong. After several attempts, not only did Tessa's condition fail to improve, she was now fighting for her life. I ran through the symptoms of asphyxiation in my head, but Tessa didn't match a single one. Clearly, she wasn't actually suffocating at all, she was faking the whole thing. Ryan and I exchanged a look, and he slowly walked over to Tessa before kicking her in the stomach with all his strength. Tessa held it in, but her brow furrowed tightly. Seeing that Ryan's method worked, the crowd urged him to kick her a few more times. True to expectations, Ryan's kicks grew progressively more forceful with each strike. After several attempts, Ryan stared at Tessa lying motionless on the ground and let out a bitter, frustrated laugh. "Since you refuse to wake up, you might as well spend the rest of your life bedridden." The next instant, Tessa cried out in pain. Ryan said with a sinister tone, "Since everyone's awake, let's settle this properly." Tessa trembled violently upon hearing those words. She put on an ingratiating smile, trying to brush it off, but was completely ignored. They slammed the photos down in front of Tessa. "Don't you have anything to explain to us?" Tessa gave an awkward smile without even glancing at the photos. "It's all a misunderstanding. I was just putting on an act with them. What I have with you is real." The three of them exchanged knowing glances and smirked. Of course they knew they were the real deal. After all, those photos were faked by us together. On the very day I was reborn, I sought out Ryan and the other two, and told them the whole truth. Phoenix squinted at me, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Why should we believe what you're saying is true?" I smiled confidently, knowing that being Tessa's biological sister was more than enough. "What's more, I have the evidence right here." I showed them Tessa's social media posts. Afraid of being exposed, she flaunted their gifs on her main account while chatting with each of them on different alt accounts. Chapter 5. Once everyone compared notes, the truth came out. Sure enough, they were all just fish in Tessa's pond. Ryan kicked the chair away in a fit of rage and let out a string of curses. Leo's expression darkened noticeably. Phoenix's grip on the phone tightened, veins bulging on his hand. Unable to contain their fury, they immediately set out to confront Tessa. I cleared my throat and said, "I overheard Tessa discussing a fake death plan with my parents. Wouldn't it be better to expose her when the time comes?" The three of them finally sat down, suppressing their anger. Ryan was the first to speak up, asking me why I was helping them. "My mother and the others are trying to pull a switcheroo, making me take the fall for Tessa." The three looked at me with a hint of sympathy and gladly accepted my proposal. "Everything that follows is within our calculations." Tessa is still trying to sweet-talk Ryan and the others, and they're amused by her clownish antics. Seeing that they remain unmoved, Tessa clings to Ryan's pant leg, putting on a pitiful expression. "I'll do anything if you just trust me." Ryan crouched beside Tessa, who lay collapsed on the ground, gently stroking her face with a delighted smile. "Then come back with us, and let's see your sincerity." Tessa stared in disbelief at the bodyguards rushing to take her away, screaming desperately at my mother, "Mom, save me. I don't want to go with them." My mother rushed up to the bodyguard and clung desperately to Tessa's hand, refusing to let go. "What's the difference between you and human traffickers? I won't allow this. If you dare take my daughter away, I'll call the police." Leo showed a hint of hesitation. After all, as a public figure, he had to consider the consequences, but Ryan's words instantly put his worries to rest. Even if they dared to call the police, no one would dare investigate us. Leo and Phoenix each grabbed one of my mother's arms and shoved her aside. They tossed Tessa into the car and sped off without a second glance. I watched Tessa being taken away by Ryan and his crew, feeling completely unfazed. She brought this on herself, so she'll have to face the consequences. No sooner had Ryan and his group left than my parents rushed to the police station to file a report, but Ryan had already pulled some strings, so they naturally came back empty-handed. The officer who responded to the call even threatened my mom, "If you file another false report, I'll have you arrested. My mom threw a hysterical fit at home, demanding that my dad pull some strings to get Tessa out. My dad sat on the couch smoking, looking utterly defeated. Hearing what my mom said, he flew into a rage and slammed his hand on the table. Do you think I haven't tried? I begged everyone I could think of, but it's useless. It's all her fault for provoking those lunatics. They're all powerful people. Crushing us would be as easy as stepping on ants. Are you trying to get me thrown in jail? I watched my parents' argument coldly, without a single ripple of emotion in my heart. In my past life, they abandoned me for Tessa, even cutting ties with me when I was at my lowest. Now that Tessa's just been taken in for questioning, why are they suddenly at each other's throats? In the end, my parents parted ways on bitter terms, seeing she couldn't win the argument with my dad. My mom then turned her anger on me, her eyes burned with venomous hatred. If you had been willing to suffer in Tessa's place, she never would have been taken. Why did you have to destroy our family? My father sat in silence, clearly sharing the same sentiment. I desperately forced out a few tears, turning my watery eyes toward my mother. Then why did you both throw me into the lion's den? You only helped Tessa fake her death because you knew those three were dangerous, didn't you? For a while after that, Ryan kept sending me videos of Tessa being tortured from time to time. I pretended to know nothing and showed those videos to my parents. Watching my parents in agony filled me with a twisted sense of satisfaction. It must have been agony for them to watch their most beloved daughter being humiliated right before their eyes. But this is only a fifth of the suffering I endured in my past life. Their misery is far from over. A week after Tessa was taken away by Ryan and his crew, her explicit photos were made public. Netizens went wild sharing the photos, and Leo dropped a few hints in his fan group, claiming Tessa had once tried to seduce him. His fans flooded the comments with vicious insults against Tessa, even spreading malicious rumors about her. Relatives started calling my parents, blaming them for failing to discipline their own daughter properly. My mother looked at those appalling photos online, her lips blistering with anxiety, yet she still defended Tessa. Those lunatics must have forced her into this. She would never do it willingly. Watching her desperately defend Tessa made my heart sink uncontrollably. In my past life, after I was embroiled in the photo scandal, paparazzi and influencers camped outside my doorstep. They cornered my mother at our door, but instead of defending me, she even claimed that's just the kind of person I am. Lena never grew up with us, so it's no surprise she turned out this way, with her endorsement. Everyone was even more convinced. I thought she just loved Tessa a little more than me. Only now do I realize she never really saw me as her daughter. She blamed everything on my father. First, she blamed my dad for suggesting the fake death plan that led to Tessa being taken by Ryan. Then she accused him of being useless for failing to rescue Tessa. My dad's face grew darker, and his hands on his knees clenched tighter and tighter. The next second, he completely snapped under my mom's relentless finger-pointing. He slammed the table and stood up. Why don't you admit it's your failure to raise your daughter properly that made her so shameless? In those photos, her expression of enjoyment hardly looks forced. She's completely disgraced me. But even so, my father never mentioned cutting ties with Tessa. My father took a deep drag of his cigarette, the smoke rings he exhaled completely obscuring his expression, leaving only his deep voice audible. Lena, go and admit it right now. The person in the photo is you. I rolled my eyes dramatically and continued scrolling through my phone, using my actions to reject his demand. My mother's eyes lit up, and seeing my indifference, she reached over to snatch my phone, ready to take matters into her own hands. I sidestepped and retorted, if you want to admit it, go ahead. I'm not about to drag my own name through the mud. My mother was so furious that veins bulged on her forehead. She forced a stiff smile and gritted her teeth as she agreed. But when I stepped out of the shower that night, the door I had locked was wide open, and my phone had vanished into thin air. I logged into Weibo on my computer, and my eyes were immediately drawn to the top trending topic, Scandal Photogate, female lead reveals her identity. I clicked into the hashtag and realized the Weibo account claiming to be the scandal's female lead was actually mine. With my missing phone and that identity-confessing Weibo post, it's obvious who the thief is. My mom was sitting on the sofa, legs crossed, humming a tune. Since you refuse to admit it, I'll just do it for you. Trying to clear your name is pointless. Just admit it already. I scoffed and turned back to my room. Admit it. In your dreams, though I resemble Tessa 90%. That remaining 10% is what makes her uniquely herself. Everyone can easily tell us apart. That's why, growing up, no one outside our family knew Tessa and I were twin sisters. I spliced my selfie with Tessa's photo and posted it directly on Weibo. Didn't even need to point out the differences. I never thought I'd be forced by my own parents to prove my innocence one day. My ambiguous remarks were quickly interpreted in over a dozen different ways by netizens, with the photos serving as undeniable evidence. The very netizens who had been criticizing me realized they were being used as pawns and, fueled by anger, dug up every last detail about Tessa. Some of the information was completely unknown even to me, such as Tessa having had 10 abortions in 2 years. Ryan added fuel to the fire by releasing those unsavory videos they had filmed, making Tessa a hot topic all over again. Tessa's reputation was completely ruined, and they took advantage of the situation to send her into the world of pleasure. Squeezing every last bit of value from her, my parents couldn't escape the fallout either. Nearing retirement, they were reported online for improper family conduct and ultimately fired by their company. Not only did they not receive a single penny of their pension, but they also had to pay compensation to the company. I deliberately leaked Tessa's news to them, leaving them drowning in tears and unable to pull themselves together. After all, they played their part in my suffering too. It's only fair they get a taste of it themselves. Chapter 12. The next time I heard about Tessa was when Ryan called. On the other end of the line, he congratulated me with a laugh. Tessa fell ill and died in a client's bed. I wasn't surprised by this outcome. Every bit of vengeance I failed to exact in my past life has now been settled in this one. Chapter 6. When Ryan brought Tessa's body back, my mother had a mental breakdown upon seeing her cold, lifeless form. She kept murmuring, "Tessa. It's all my fault. Please forgive me, my child." My mother ran out of the house and never came back. For the first month or two, my father searched for her with all his heart and soul. Whether it was putting up flyers on the streets or posting missing person notices online, all efforts came to nothing. He hadn't received even the faintest clue. As time went on, my father stopped looking for my mother and even moved his new lover into our home. He declared with conviction, "I deserve my own life too. And I'll need someone to take care of me when I'm old." I watched the 6-year-old boy by his new lover's side, his face a near-perfect copy of my father's, and smiled with bitter amusement. So my father had been cheating all along. After 3 years of working, I decided to better myself and applied for a master's program at a top-tier university in the country. On the day of my graduate school graduation, a deranged woman crashed the ceremony. She grabbed my hand and kept apologizing to me over and over. "It's my fault, darling. I never should have made you fake your death. Tessa, please forgive me, won't you?" As I looked at my mother, who, even in her madness, hadn't forgotten Tessa, I no longer felt the sorrow I once had. I gently moved her hand away, my expression cold and detached. "You've mistaken me for someone else. I'm not your daughter." I watched as security escorted my mother away, feeling neither sorrow nor joy. Perhaps I was never destined to have a close bond with my parents, but I can still make my own life extraordinary. Story 2. In my previous life, my sister sacrificed our entire family for the sake of her one true love. After being reborn, she still showed no remorse and tried to seize my space first. However, she didn't expect that this time, all of us had been reborn. 1. Mom, where's the bracelet Grandma left behind? The one Grandma left before she passed away. My sister, who usually lounged in bed playing on her phone, suddenly burst out of her room like a madwoman. Ignoring her disheveled appearance, she shouted urgently, "What?" Mom responded, confused. My sister rushed into my bedroom, then came out frowning and said impatiently, "The silver bracelet Grandma wore before she died." She was so immersed in the joy of being reborn that she didn't notice the subtle change in Mom's expression at all. At this moment, Dad and I had just arrived home. As soon as she saw me, my sister's face lit up. She quickly grabbed my hand, and when she saw it was empty, her expression darkened instantly. "Giselle, where's your bracelet? Give it to me now." Mom and I exchanged a glance and immediately understood that she had also come back. I just didn't expect that even though she had personally killed me, Mom, and Dad in the previous life, she could still talk to us without batting an eyelid. But I didn't show it. I just replied indifferently. "What bracelet? When did I ever wear a bracelet?" In the previous life, we accidentally found that bracelet when we went to clean our old hometown a few days before the apocalypse. My sister thought it was unlucky because Grandma had worn it during her lifetime, and she casually threw it to me, who knew it was actually a treasure with its own space. It could store a large amount of food, and there was also sweet spring water and fertile farmland inside. It was precisely because of this bracelet that our family could survive in that old house during the extremely hot weather. Only then did my sister slap her forehead and ask urgently, "What date is it now?" When she learned that it was a month before the apocalypse, her excitement became almost palpable. "Great, great. This time, Everett won't have to suffer so much." As soon as she finished speaking, Mom and Dad's expressions changed abruptly. Everett, the name my sister mentioned, was the love of her life. In the previous life, in order to save him, my sister brutally killed me. She lied that I had a conflict with people looking for water outside, and she survived only because Everett saved her. Mom and Dad were heartbroken, but in the apocalypse, it was already difficult to stay alive, so they couldn't focus on anything else and could only allow Everett to enter our home. However, my sister and the others soon discovered that the bracelet recognized its master. And only I could enter that space. As food became scarcer and scarcer, under Everett's impatient gaze, my sister finally locked Mom and Dad outside, letting them die of dehydration in the extremely hot weather. Perhaps even heaven couldn't stand it. When we opened our eyes, we had all been reborn, and a whole month earlier than my sister. This time, we must prevent the tragedy of the previous life from repeating itself. As for my sister, this ungrateful wretch, since that's the case, Let her fend for herself in the apocalypse, too. When my sister saw that all our eyes were on her, she immediately shut up and composed herself, afraid that we would notice something amiss. Ignoring her pajamas, she tried to cover up her eagerness and shouted, "I'm going out." Then she turned and disappeared from sight, obviously going to find her beloved Everett, Mom, Dad, and I sat silently at the table. Finally, Dad broke the silence. Hui Jin. We always said that Genevieve lacked a sense of security because she was born prematurely, but in the previous life, she didn't hesitate to kill us. Mom's voice was choked with sobs. I used to think that since I raised her, she was my daughter, and it didn't matter if she was my biological child or not. However, the experiences of the previous life told her that it wasn't the case at all. My sister was adopted by Mom and Dad from an orphanage. Unexpectedly, 2 years after the adoption, Mom got pregnant with me. At that time, my sister showed her disgust and even persuaded Mom to abort me more than once. Mom originally thought it was just a sign of her lack of security, besides giving her more care. She didn't pay too much attention, but it ultimately led to that tragic ending, this time around. We were busy storing food in the space and looking for a place to stay during the apocalypse, but we didn't mention my sister at all. Now that she was back, it seemed that we had already decided how to deal with her. Let her fend for herself. Mom wiped away her tears and gently stroked my hand. I don't ask for anything else. As long as our family of 3 can live well, that's more than enough. We will, I comforted her softly. 3, in the evening, my sister finally came back, apparently. She had successfully persuaded Everett, and a relaxed expression naturally showed on her face. "Mom, how much money is left at home?" Mom didn't respond, but Dad asked, "What do you need the money for?" My sister was already 28 years old. Over the years, she had guarded against me like a thief. She neither went out to work nor contributed to the family, just living off Mom and Dad. So basically, all her expenses came from asking Mom and Dad for money. "Just tell me, I want to know." My sister plopped down next to Dad, squeezing me aside, and said, "Give me 1,000,000 yuan, and I'll go out to work. What do you think?" She looked as if Mom and Dad were her personal ATMs. Our family was just an ordinary middle-class family. To come up with 1,000,000 yuan, we would probably have to sell our house. After saying that, my sister seemed to realize this, but she still held Dad's hand and coquettishly said, "Dear Dad, if you really can't, you can take out a loan. It's okay. It's just 1,000,000 yuan, just 1,000,000 yuan." Dad's face had turned extremely terrible looking. My sister knew that the family was about to face difficulties, but instead of reminding us, she was so heartless. Finally, Dad couldn't take it anymore and slapped her across the face. Before my sister could react, she fell to the ground. "Genevieve, I've been too lenient with you all these years. I've spoiled you rotten. Do you even care about this family anymore?" My sister had never been beaten since she was a child. Her eyes immediately turned red. Maybe she knew she was wrong, but for the sake of her beloved, she still stubbornly shouted, "You have money, why won't you give it to me? I'm also your daughter. Are you going to leave all the money to Giselle?" Why? Dad was so angry that he trembled all over and asked the most helpless question from the bottom of his heart. "Genevieve, what does our family owe you? Your mom and I raised you and your sister together. We've never shown favoritism. Do you have any conscience?" Tears streamed down Genevieve's face. "You're lying. You've always favored her. It's been like this since we were kids, even if you don't say it." "I know." Mom, who had been silent, finally trembled and pointed outside. "Get out, Mom." Genevieve looked at Mom in disbelief. Mom, who had always doted on her the most, would always be the first to comfort her whenever she was unhappy. But now she was telling her to get out. Genevieve couldn't believe it and immediately turned her anger on me. "Is it you, Giselle? What lies did you tell Mom and Dad? You're so despicable. Mom and Dad aren't just yours." I looked at her with a dark expression. Mom and Dad had never shown favoritism. It was she who was obsessed with it and wrongly attributed it to them. I could overlook what happened in the previous life for Mom and Dad's sake, but now, why should I care what an ungrateful person thought? "You're right." Under her shocked gaze, I dragged her to the door and threw her out. I said coldly, "You're not Mom and Dad's daughter at all. You should have grown up in an orphanage and died alone. Mom and Dad shouldn't have given you extra love." With a bang, I closed the door tightly, almost in her face, under her stunned gaze. Soon, the sound of her kicking and cursing came from outside the door. But none of us paid any attention. Knowing something in our hearts was one thing, but emotional ties were another. Soon, only Mom's soft sobs could be heard in the living room. Dad also turned his head with red-rimmed eyes. For a while, we were all silent, silently accepting everything. Fortunately, the gloomy atmosphere didn't last long, and we quickly perked up. We had already found a place to stay during the apocalypse, these past few days. Dad and I had been leaving early and coming back late to check on the renovation progress. It was a relatively secluded villa area with a good terrain. It also had a cellar like our old hometown, so it wouldn't be difficult to get through the extremely hot weather, especially with my space. Yes, as soon as I came back, I went to the old house in the suburbs and took the bracelet, leaving only an ordinary substitute, just like in the previous life. Only I could open the bracelet that had recognized its master. I was originally worried about how to explain the apocalypse to Mom and Dad, but unexpectedly, they had also been reborn, so we decided to prepare supplies for the apocalypse when my sister wasn't paying attention. We didn't dare to buy things openly. Instead, we rented a warehouse in the name of me opening a supermarket. We went to various shops every day, under the pretext of testing new products. We only bought a small amount from each place to avoid attracting attention. At night, we secretly put everything into the space. Things put into the space would remain in their original state, and we hardly had to worry about them expiring or getting moldy. During this time, Mom also bought a lot of seeds. When we went to the warehouse at night, she would help plant some. In her words, although it might not be of much use, it was still something to look forward to after solving the food problem. The next thing was accommodation. In the previous life, we encountered extremely hot weather when cleaning the old house. Fortunately, the cellar of the old house was a good place to take shelter, so the first thing that came to our mind was a house with a cellar. It was too late to renovate the old house, and besides, my sister already knew about it, so it wasn't safe to go there, for a while. We couldn't think of any other choice except a villa with a wine cellar. Mom and Dad gritted their teeth, sold the house, took out a loan, and with my careful selection, we finally settled on this place. After getting the house, we didn't slack off. We reinforced the doors, raised the protective nets, and strengthened the windows. In other words, we improved all the exposed parts. For electricity, we chose solar energy first. We didn't have to worry about running out of power in the early stage, and there were generators in the later stage. Overall, it was sufficient, not only humans, but we wouldn't be afraid even if zombies came. Just as Mom, Dad, and I were about to start moving, my sister came back again. 5. Genevieve's arrogant nature finally bowed down in the face of money. Indeed, her beloved Everett pretended to be noble, but in reality, he was penniless. Genevieve needed to buy supplies, so she had no choice but to ask her parents for help. This time, Mom and Dad didn't soften their hearts. When they saw them arrive, they didn't even give them a glance. Genevieve had never been treated like this before, but under Everett's impatient gaze, she held back her anger and humbly said, "Mom, Dad, I was really wrong last time. Don't be angry anymore." However, Mom and Dad had lost all hope in her. They were unmoved no matter what she said. Genevieve seemed to have expected this situation. As soon as she finished speaking, she dropped a bombshell. "Mom, Dad, I'm going to marry Everett." "What?" Mom looked at the two of them with a hint of scrutiny. "Are you serious?" Seeing an opportunity, Genevieve quickly replied, "Yes, actually, Everett and I have been together for a long time. After what happened last time, I decided that we'll move out after we get married." As she spoke, she pretended to wipe away tears, obviously trying to gain Mom and Dad's sympathy by taking a step back. Everett didn't say a word throughout, but from his expression, it was clear that he wasn't happy about it. After all, in his eyes, Genevieve was just someone who fawned over him. If she hadn't spent money on him, he wouldn't have given her the time of day. If what Genevieve said was true and he didn't have to spend any money, he wouldn't have participated in this farce. Dad knew her intentions well and sneered, "Get married if you want. We won't stop you even if you move your household registration out now." A glimmer of light flashed in Genevieve's eyes, but Everett's face darkened instantly. I smiled lightly. "Sister, you seem very happy, but brother-in-law doesn't look too pleased." Genevieve glared at me. Seeing that Everett's expression was unpleasant, she quickly changed the subject. "Dad, Everett and I plan to have a wedding first and then get married," Mom said coldly. "What? Here to ask for money again?" Genevieve had been away from home for a long time. We hadn't contacted her, and she didn't receive a warm welcome when she came back. Her patience had run out, and she said impatiently, "Mom, why do you always talk like that? I'm getting married. Don't you have anything to say? Are you just going to let me lose face? Besides, am I not your daughter? I'm getting married. Aren't you going to give me any dowry?" In the end, she was still after the money. Mom looked at her disappointedly. "Then tell us. What do you want us to do?" Genevieve said confidently, "Of course, you have to throw me a grand wedding. Forget about the $1,000,000 yuan, but you should at least give me 500,000 yuan as a dowry." Dad finally couldn't take it anymore. "Who exactly are you going to marry?" He pointed at Everett. "If you want to marry him, ask him for these things. We don't have anything." Genevieve panicked. "Everett has just started working. Where would he get so much money?" "Then where do we get so much money?" "Genevieve, have you lost all your conscience?" Genevieve wasn't willing to back down. "Why don't you have it? Don't think I don't know. You just want to secretly leave the money to Giselle." Hearing these words again, Dad pinched his forehead wearily. "Just leave, marry whoever you want. After raising you for so many years, it seems we just weren't meant to be a family." "Dad, enough." Everett, who had been listening silently, finally exploded. He realized that he wouldn't get any money this time, and his pride was hurt. He said coldly to Genevieve, "Since your parents look down on me, that's it, I'm leaving." With that, he walked out without looking back, and the door slammed shut behind him. Seeing her beloved really leave, Genevieve could no longer control her emotions and completely broke down. She shouted, "Mom and Dad, what on earth do you want? Is this how you treat me? Are you just going to watch and ruin my happiness? I'm still your daughter after all." Mom looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "We treat you as our daughter, but have you ever treated us as your parents?" Genevieve's eyes dodged slightly, but she still justified loudly, "Of course I have. You hid the fact that you had Giselle from me first. Isn't it reasonable for me to be angry? And Giselle is your biological daughter. Don't think I don't know you'll leave all the good things to her in the future." The more she spoke, the more she thought she was in the right. "Look, I'm about to get married. But you won't even give me a decent wedding. What else is this if not favoritism?" Seeing Mom's chest heaving violently, I said, "Well, we really can't afford that much money, but we can give you the old house in the suburbs." Genevieve's voice stopped abruptly, and she stared straight at me. Really, in the past, she definitely wouldn't have agreed, but the bracelet was hidden in the old house, and although the place was remote, the house was still worth a lot of money. Which was better than getting nothing. She had tried to get the bracelet from the old house before, but the place was in a mess and uninhabited. Mom and Dad had also taken great care to prevent her from entering. She was afraid that the risks of forcing her way in would outweigh the benefits, so she hadn't succeeded yet. As soon as I said this, she was immediately tempted. Sometimes I really don't know whether to call Genevieve smart or stupid, after being reborn. She knew to hide her identity immediately and plan for money and supplies, but she never thought of hiding the bracelet in another place. "Then give me the key to the old house now and take me to transfer the ownership tomorrow. We can give you the key first, but the condition is that you must move your household registration out," I said calmly. "What?" Genevieve immediately stood up and pointed at me, shouting angrily, "I knew it was you behind all this. Do you want me to cut off all ties with this family completely? Mom and Dad, look, I told you Giselle has bad intentions." She was still yelling hysterically until Dad suddenly slammed his hand on the table. Then she realized that the reaction she expected didn't happen. Everyone's eyes were fixed on her, filled with complex emotions she couldn't understand. "Do as Giselle said." Dad made the final decision. Genevieve finally felt scared. She once thought that we had all been reborn. But she quickly comforted herself that if that were true, we couldn't be so calm. Perhaps the approaching apocalypse made her anxious. She said viciously, "Fine, I'll move it. You'll regret it sooner or later." Dad obviously didn't want to see her anymore, with time running out. He managed to move Genevieve's household registration out before the end of the workday. Genevieve got the key as she wished and left without looking back to find Everett. The apocalypse was approaching, and whether the house was transferred or not didn't matter to her anymore. While she was busy selling supplies, the renovation of the villa was completed. Mom, Dad, and I didn't hesitate to prepare to move there. 6. When I say we moved, we didn't actually take many things. Just some daily necessities and items with sentimental value. We didn't plan to leave openly. Most of the things in the house were left as they were to prevent Genevieve from getting suspicious if she suddenly came back. I also spread the news about the day Genevieve came back with Everett and made a scene throughout the neighborhood. Soon, everyone knew that Genevieve insisted on marrying a poor guy and even asked for a dowry of 1 million yuan every time I appeared in the neighborhood. I would be stopped by gossipy aunts who would ask, "So did your parents give the money to your sister in the end?" I would sigh and say, "Alas, where would we get so much money? They wouldn't let it go. But I heard your sister still left with that guy." I would sigh again. "Yes, my parents didn't have that much money at once, so they had to give her the house in the suburbs first. Let's not talk about it, Auntie. After all, it's the old family house. My parents haven't been in a good mood these days, and I plan to take them out to relax. I have to go now. This way." If Genevieve suddenly came looking for us and couldn't find anyone, there was nothing to worry about. Mom, Dad, and I left the neighborhood justifiably and moved into the villa. Looking at the magnificent villa, our moods immediately improved. No wonder everyone wants to be rich. On the first day of moving in, Mom, Dad, and I cooked hot pot, eating the steaming hot pot. We felt much less tired from the past few days. With food and a safe place to live, I believe we won't have a hard time surviving the apocalypse this time. After dinner, Mom was still in a gloomy mood. She touched the sofa and felt uneasy. "Giselle, this is the first time Mom has lived in such a nice house, but I just feel something is off. We were reborn and could prepare in advance. But what about those who didn't? I'm not a saint. I also learned my lesson from Genevieve in the previous life." But she still couldn't get over it. I comforted her. "It's okay, Mom. I know most people would think this way." I turned on the computer, entered a URL, and opened a hidden website. My avatar showed 4/21. There were still 17 days left until then. That was the day I died in my previous life, and my account would expire on that day, and I could no longer access this page. "What's this?" Mom asked me in confusion. I told her, "I found this by chance a few days after I was reborn. It's a place exclusively for reborn people. Our identities are absolutely hidden here, so there's no need to worry about any trouble. I posted the news about the apocalypse on it. Don't worry, we may not be able to do much, but there are definitely people who will handle it. Only then did Mom feel reassured. No wonder I saw construction everywhere these days. I thought I just didn't notice it in my previous life. I patted her gently, so don't worry. Relax and think about your hobbies so you can pass the time in the next few days. Don't worry about other things. The day before the extreme heat arrived, the temperature began to rise gradually. Fortunately, there was enough electricity, and the air conditioner worked well, so the heat wasn't too obvious. These days, we weren't idle but were busy checking for anything missing or incomplete. Mom knew the benefits of the space and specially cooked a lot of food so that we could eat it directly when the apocalypse came, without having to worry about any trouble caused by cooking. After all, it's better to avoid unnecessary trouble. Just because the house is renovated doesn't mean everything is perfect. Genevieve finally discovered the secret of the bracelet, although she managed to get it. She couldn't activate the space no matter what. She thought it would only appear when the apocalypse arrived. However, as the apocalypse approached, she became uneasy and came to our door. Fortunately, I had the foresight to install surveillance cameras all over the house, which also served as a way to pass the time. Genevieve knocked on the door so loudly that the neighbors couldn't help but open their doors. "What are you doing? Don't you know there are other people here?" Genevieve had run out of patience and retorted, "So what? It's my home. What does it have to do with you?" The neighbor obviously disliked her and said directly, "You knock on the door to get into your own home. Don't think we don't know what kind of person you are, an ungrateful wretch. Stop pretending. You drove your parents away." Genevieve got anxious. "What do you mean? My parents aren't home. Where did they go?" The neighbor looked at her disdainfully. "You don't even know this. I really wonder if you're their real daughter." With that, in front of Genevieve, whose face turned red and then pale, the neighbor closed the door. However, Genevieve didn't care. If I wasn't there and she couldn't open the space, she would be in big trouble, so she stopped everyone in the neighborhood and asked them. Finally, she learned that I had taken Mom and Dad out to relax and wouldn't be back for a while. She couldn't believe it and called me several times, but none of the calls went through. Genevieve understood that we were extremely angry and wouldn't pay attention to her in the short term. She cursed at the phone viciously and had no choice but to hurry back to the old house. 7. As the ground temperature soared rapidly, it reached 40 degrees Celsius in just one day and continued to rise. Many people gradually noticed something was wrong. At this rate, it wasn't impossible for the temperature to exceed 50 degrees Celsius, which quickly caused panic among some people. Fortunately, when the country intervened in time, the underground shelters that had been under construction everywhere were open to the public, providing shelter for those who couldn't survive in the extreme heat. Overall, as long as everyone worked together, they could get through the difficulties of the apocalypse. However, Genevieve, who was busy setting up the old house in the suburbs, obviously didn't hear the news and was still focused on taking care of Everett and his troublesome mother. The space was limited, so she had to store the food in the cellar. As the temperature rose, only the dry food seemed to have barely avoided spoilage. Food suddenly became scarce, and Everett's mother was very dissatisfied and scolded Genevieve every day. Although Genevieve was domineering at home, she was speechless in the face of such obstacles, but all these had nothing to do with me. I was living quite comfortably in the spacious villa. Although we saw the notice, Mom, Dad, and I chose to stay in the villa, not to mention that this place was safe with few people after our renovation, and I didn't have to worry about my space being exposed. Enjoying the cool air from the air conditioner and having an abundance of delicious food, I was extremely relaxed and happy. Before, while the network was still working properly, I downloaded thousands of novels and movies and TV shows, so boredom was no longer a problem. My parents were different from me. Instead of indulging in pleasure, they weren't used to the sudden leisure after working hard for half their lives. They would occasionally go into the space to farm, their moods relaxed, and smiles appeared on their faces more and more often. Of course, we weren't completely cut off from the outside world. Besides listening to the radio every day to get information, I would also exchange information with others when the network was restored occasionally. In my previous life, I only stayed in the apocalypse for a short time, but experiencing the endless heat this time, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. Fortunately, our family was safely reunited this time. 3 months later, the temperature began to drop slowly. However, after a heavy rain, the temperature plummeted from over 60 degrees Celsius to minus 60 degrees Celsius. The extreme cold didn't come as gradually as the extreme heat. If the country hadn't issued a warning in advance, many people might not have survived that long night. After experiencing the extreme heat, we obviously couldn't adapt to the sudden extreme cold. We turned on the floor heating and electric stoves at the same time and barely managed to keep the room temperature within a bearable range. Suddenly, the computer issued a harsh alarm, and we remembered Genevieve. Checking the surveillance records, we found that they had returned to the neighborhood from the old house during the heavy rain. However, The neighborhood was empty, and they couldn't get in, so they had to force the door open. We could hardly recognize Genevieve. She had lost so much weight in 3 months that it was shocking. Everett and the others weren't much better. The three of them were thin, sallow, and covered in filth. Thinking about it, it wasn't surprising. After all, the basement of the old house was just a simple earthen kiln, although it could barely withstand the apocalypse. Anyone would have a hard time staying in that small, dark place for 3 months. You said your house had food. Why is there nothing here? Everett's mother was still overbearing and used her last bit of strength to blame Genevieve. Naturally, we didn't leave any food behind, and when people entered the underground shelters, they tried their best to take all the supplies with them. It would undoubtedly be very difficult for them to find food even if they went out. Genevieve was miserable. She had done nothing at home and could occasionally lose her temper, but she was clearly overwhelmed when it came to taking responsibility. She looked at Everett for help, but Everett just wrapped himself tightly in a thick quilt and gave her a cold stare. "Didn't you say you would help me get through the apocalypse? Then do it." Helpless, Genevieve gritted her teeth, wrapped herself up, and went out to look for food. Even if she found food, she still had to endure the obstacles from Everett's mother. This time, Mom and Dad didn't react at all. They just said indifferently, "She brought it upon herself," and then ignored them. 8. Surprisingly, the extreme cold seemed much shorter than the extreme heat. After a heavy rain 2 months later, the apocalypse finally ended, whether it was us or the others who came out from underground. We were all dazed when we saw the scene on the ground. There were no expected cheers. Everyone just hugged each other, feeling lucky to have survived, and silently wiped the tears from their eyes. This time, thanks to the existence of reborn people, the country managed to prevent a major disaster. But would we be so lucky next time? Anyway, the most urgent task now is post-disaster reconstruction. However, unexpectedly, Genevieve was still alive. When she was found, she stared blankly, hardly looking like a normal person. Everett wasn't in a much better condition. Behind them, a bloody corpse silently told how they had survived the apocalypse. It wasn't until she saw the dense crowd around her, all frowning and looking at her, that Genevieve finally showed some normal emotions and broke down, shouting, "Help me, hurry, take me away from here." It turned out that in the extremely cold weather, they couldn't find any food, and they couldn't survive due to the low temperature. So they crawled all the way to the basement of the neighborhood. When they left, most of the messy things in the neighborhood had been piled here. The thick pile of things had saved their lives in the extreme cold, but Everett's mother was old, and due to various problems with the climate and food, she lost her life as soon as she crawled into the basement. Without food, it goes without saying what Genevieve and the others did to survive. As soon as she saw us, Genevieve almost cried and begged us to take her away. However, when she clearly saw that we were unharmed, she asked in confusion, "Why are you all okay?" Someone couldn't stand it and said coldly, "Before the extreme weather, the country had called on everyone to take shelter. I'm afraid only you were silly enough not to go." Upon hearing this, Genevieve instantly broke down. "No, it shouldn't be like this. It clearly wasn't like this in my previous life. It shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. You're all lying to me, right? Are you crazy?" For a moment, everyone started whispering and talking. Only I whispered in her ear, "Of course it's because we've all been reborn." Genevieve immediately widened her eyes in horror and said in disbelief, "Then why did you still?" I smiled at her and said, "Sister, sometimes living is more painful than dying, isn't it?" Soon, the story of what happened to Genevieve in the basement spread like wildfire. What they did under extreme weather, though understandable, made people uncomfortable. What's more, there were clearly better options available to them. It's just unexpected that even though she had personally killed me, Mom, and Dad in the previous life, she could still talk to us without batting an eyelid. Before, she could slack off, relying on her parents to take care of everything, but now that she knew we were also reborn, she didn't dare to approach us and started to hide in fear. And her life was no different from when the apocalypse was ongoing. She and Everett eventually ended up together. No matter what, Everett's mother was his biological mother, and he blamed everything on Genevieve, even though they could only live under a bridge. Whenever Everett was in a bad mood, Genevieve would be severely beaten. My mother once wondered, we were so good to Genevieve, but Everett never treated her nicely. Why did she kill us for that man? However, blood ties are indeed a mysterious thing, and simple love can't easily change them. In Genevieve's view, since Mom and Dad adopted her, they shouldn't have had another child and should have poured all their love into her alone. It was precisely because she knew how much Mom and Dad loved her that she dared to vent her dissatisfaction confidently and use it to demonstrate against me. However, in fact, she was the only one who truly minded that Mom and Dad had another child. Anyway, a wrong is a wrong. As I said, sometimes living is more tormenting than dying, and she brought all this upon herself. Story 2. With just 3 hours left before the zombie attack, I was reborn in the arms of a stranger. Kill me. I finally resigned myself to tell him, because that was our only hope for survival. The last button on my dress was undone when I suddenly opened my eyes and pushed him away. What's wrong? The man, half-dressed, was interrupted and looked at me quizzically with a raised eyebrow. What was wrong with me? I glanced at my phone. It was 11:53 p.m. I wiped the tears from the corner of my eyes, feeling somewhat dazed. Was it just a vivid nightmare fueled by alcohol, or had I really been bitten by a zombie, mutated, and then reborn? Wrapped tightly in the blanket, I shivered uncontrollably, unsure of how to respond to him. If you don't want to continue, I won't force you. Clearly uncomfortable, the man stood up and walked into the bathroom without saying much more. Feeling woozy, I looked around the unfamiliar hotel room, trying hard to remember. That's right, today I had caught my boyfriend cheating and decisively broke up with him. Later at night, I went to a bar alone to drown my sorrows. While tipsy, I noticed a man who stood up from the crowd as he left a private room. His clean-cut business attire seemed out of place in the garish, indulgent setting of the bar. That's when I set my sights on him. Why should I be faithful in love only to be betrayed? If that scumbag could hook up with a rich woman, why couldn't I attract a successful man? In a surge of drunken impulse, I threw myself at him. I knocked my throbbing head a few times, desperately trying to recall the nightmarish scenes that followed. In my memory, we did not continue our intimate encounter. Instead, I suddenly lost control of my emotions, clung to him, and sobbed out my grievances for a long time until I fell into a confused sleep. He indeed didn't take advantage of me, he just listened to my emotional outpouring for hours, until a loud door slam woke me abruptly from his embrace. As soon as we turned on the light, we saw a blood-covered waiter collapse at the foot of our bed, his face as pale as paper, crying out in terror, "Zombies! There are zombies! They're eating people!" I looked at my phone in astonishment. It was 2:50 a.m. The soundproofing in the star-rated hotel was excellent, but at that moment, chilling roars and deafening banging on the door from outside scared me terribly. The most horrifying thing was, just as we had managed to get dressed, the waiter mutated. Suddenly, her eyes blood-red and ferocious, she lunged at me, biting the hand I used to push her away. The pain made me sweat instantly, and I screamed in agony as I desperately kicked at her, but she still tore a piece of flesh from my hand. "Are you all right?" The man rushed over and knocked the waiter to the ground, anxiously inquiring about my condition. Before I could speak, the waiter sprang up from the ground with unnatural speed, lunging towards the man who was closer to her. I could clearly see the flesh from my hand still hanging in her gaping, bloodied mouth. "Watch out!" I cried out in terror, and the man was tackled to the ground, struggling with the waiter. Despite my fear, I tried to get up to help him, but suddenly felt dizzy, and the wound burned intensely. Pain, like boiling oil coursing through my veins with my blood, made me scream madly. The last thing I remember was the man desperately breaking the waiter's neck, and then I frantically lunged at him. "I'll be going first. Your car is parked in front of the hotel. Feel free to call room service before you check out tomorrow. I'll cover the costs." The man's voice interrupted my recollections. I saw him already neatly dressed, his figure trim and austere, the epitome of restraint. I wanted to speak, but he had already picked up his suit and left through the door, swallowing the words that almost slipped out. I sighed deeply. It was just a fleeting encounter fueled by alcohol. Why would he believe me if I told him that zombies were about to arrive? Even I couldn't be sure myself that the zombies would come in 3 hours. Yet, feeling terribly anxious, I quickly got up, washed up, grabbed my bag, and rushed home. What if those memories were real? Although the waiter had burst in at 2:50 a.m., that didn't mean the zombies outside would only appear then. I needed to get home as quickly as possible. While in the car, I called my roommate Chloe, who was still watching a midnight movie with her boyfriend celebrating their anniversary. I urged them to stop watching and come home immediately. Then, in the middle of the night, I could only go to a 24-hour convenience store, where I grabbed a lot of water, bread, instant noodles, and other daily necessities. I nearly cleared out several shelves, and the store clerk almost thought I was robbing the place. The streets were quiet in the early hours, and I reached the underground parking garage by 1:33 a.m. I called Chloe again. They said they were almost home, so I started moving stuff by myself, although I had carefully checked my surroundings and everything was dead quiet. A security guard zombie suddenly appeared and knocked me down as I was bending over to grab things from the trunk. The zombie, incredibly strong, bit directly into my throat. I didn't even have a chance to struggle. Blood choked my airways, and my screams abruptly ended. I could only desperately gasp for air, feeling like a fish pressed down on a cutting board. So zombies were real, and so was rebirth. Was the purpose of my rebirth just to be bitten by a zombie again, suddenly? Amidst hazy gasps, as I screamed and kicked the man who was bent over my neck away, I opened my eyes to find, damn, I had reborn back to my bed again. "You're crazy." The man fell to the floor unprepared, his face contorting with pain and anger. I covered my neck, where he had left a hickey, feeling the heat and trembling of my skin. "Sorry, I didn't mean to kick you," I hurriedly explained. Then, trembling, I checked my phone. 11:53 p.m. Indeed, I had been reborn again. If you don't want to continue, just say it. I won't force you. He seemed very angry but didn't continue to lash out at me. He stood up, his disheveled, strong physique particularly tempting. Unable to look him in the eye, I quickly turned around and explained, I was just killed by a zombie. And I've just come back. We don't have time to continue. We need to prepare some supplies and think of a way to survive. I spoke anxiously, hoping he would believe me. The man looked at me with a slight surprise and then smirked, turning to walk into the bathroom. It was clear he thought I was either an idiot or treating him like one. I'm serious. Zombies might be out there eating people right now. It's getting more dangerous by the minute, I explained loudly. But he closed the bathroom door without turning back, ignoring me completely, hopelessly. I glanced at my phone again. 11:56 p.m. No point waiting if he didn't believe me. I couldn't afford to waste time. I quickly got dressed and left the house, calling Chloe to urgently come home. At that moment, everything outside was calm, with no news on the internet. It was the calm before the storm. After clearing out the shelves of the convenience store near my building entrance, I paid a delivery guy to bring the goods up using the elevator, and then I locked myself early at home. I was just a 25-year-old ordinary office worker. I'm no elite female warrior. How could I not be terrified facing those brutal, ferocious zombies? I hope that this time, we can stay safely at home and hold out until rescue arrives. After all, the zombie outbreak happened in the early hours when most people were asleep at home. Perhaps if we can hold on for a while, the military will be able to eliminate the infected. That's what I tell myself to find some comfort. But Chloe and her boyfriend Blake didn't come home early as usual. At 1:38 a.m., the door burst open, and there was Blake, biting into the back of Chloe's neck as they stumbled into the hallway. Scarlet, help, save me. Chloe's cream-colored coat was soaked with blood as she lay on the ground, desperately reaching out to me, her face a mess of tears and blood. I screamed like a madwoman and rushed forward, swinging a hammer I had found earlier, frantically smashing it down on Blake. I had no family left. Chloe was my only close friend. Since college, we had been inseparable, almost like sisters. Warm, bloody fluid mixed with some unidentifiable liquid splattered all over me. I felt like vomiting, wanted to hide in a corner and cry my eyes out. But I wanted to save Chloe more, even though I knew it was too late. Finally, Blake lay motionless on the floor, and my hands trembled uncontrollably as tears streamed down my face. But just as I thought it was over, Chloe suddenly leaped up from the ground and lunged at me with a ferocity far beyond any wild beast. Looking into the familiar yet estranged face of Chloe, I knew I had lost any chance of escape. The strength of a zombie was too much for an ordinary woman like me to withstand. Not wanting to be bitten, my mind went blank, and I ran to the balcony and jumped from the 6th floor. I thought jumping would be a swift end, but as my consciousness faded, I lay sprawled in the flower bed below, still unable to escape the hellish pain of my shattered body. Idiot, I really wasn't thinking. I'll never jump from a low floor again. When I opened my eyes again, the insane pain still lingered in my mind. I clung to the man beside me, shaking uncontrollably, unleashing all the screams I couldn't voice before I died in bed. You. The man looked up at me in astonishment, his eyes as clear and bright as obsidian, full of disbelief. He must have never encountered a woman who screamed so tragically in bed. Realizing what was happening, I covered my eyes with one hand, feeling the hot tears on my cheeks. I'm not assaulting you, am I? The man seemed unsure, cautiously moving away from me. I'm truly sorry. I know it's very uncomfortable for a man to be interrupted like this, but I had to. Sorry. It's not your fault. I have something urgent. I need to go. I pushed him aside and staggered into the bathroom to wash my face, trying to sober up completely. I wanted to survive, to save Chloe, not to resign myself to fate. I believe that being given a second chance at life must have a special purpose, not just to leave me caught between living and dying. Quickly getting ready to leave, I glanced back at the man standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows and offered a final friendly warning. The zombie virus outbreak is imminent. Go home quickly. Stock up on food and drinks, and make sure you lock your doors. He looked back at me, frowning. I knew he wouldn't believe me and turned to leave, checking my phone. It was 12:08 a.m. This time I went straight to the cinema to find Chloe, dragging them desperately home. This time we managed to escape home with supplies in time, but zombies seem to have particularly sharp hearing. Just a brief argument between Chloe and Blake attracted a zombie that banged on our door. As time went on, the sounds of doors slamming, windows breaking, and screams filled the building. I ran to the balcony and saw a man across the street, desperately running out of his bedroom holding his blood-covered child, shouting for help. Just as he opened his front door, a woman caught up to him and tackled him viciously. Some people, overwhelmed like me, jumped from their buildings, others screamed as they fled their homes, and some even grabbed knives to defend themselves against their once loved ones turned violent. More and more lights turned on, but the once cozy nights were replaced with horrific scenes of slaughter. It turned out that some had already been infected, and the person next to you might suddenly turn into a demonic mutant. What on earth was happening? How did these mutations occur? I couldn't figure it out. Then, a second and third zombie appeared at our door. Even as we hid silently in the bedroom closet, the zombies outside banged against the door relentlessly like perpetual motion machines. Trembling, I checked my phone. It was 2:36 a.m. I realized that in my previous deaths, I had died too early to know that within an hour, the entire complex would turn into a zombie playground. The virus spread incredibly fast, and the zombies were unusually strong. Was there anywhere left safe in this city? Clutching a hammer, my heart turned to ice. Eventually, our security door was broken through, and the bedroom door couldn't withstand the blows either. We were annihilated. Opening my eyes again, I resolved to find Chloe. Since the security door couldn't keep the zombies out, we decided to drive out of the city, hoping that other places might not have been affected by the virus. The first time we hit the road smoothly, but when passing through the neighboring county, we found the roads blocked by cars from an accident. As we tried to turn around and find another route, we were quickly surrounded by 5 or 6 zombies. Our car was overturned, and no one escaped. The last thing I saw was the time flashing on the car's display, 2:35 a.m. It turned out the virus had already spread to the neighboring county, and in considerable numbers. Next time, we continued to flee. I informed Chloe and the others about the zombie virus outbreak and strongly suggested, despite their initial skepticism, that we take a different route to a less populated countryside in hopes of finding refuge. But as we left a small supermarket at a gas station in the suburbs, we saw a zombie biting into a woman's throat just a few meters away under a streetlight, blood splattering everywhere. They finally believed what I had said, and Chloe screamed in terror. The zombie, alarmed, growled and lunged at us. I was accidentally tripped by one of them, and Blake pulled Chloe and ran. Zombies bite the last person first. Let's run. Scarlett, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Chloe cried, looking back and apologizing, but she didn't stop running, even managing to carry 2 large bags of food with her. Though a zombie was formidable, the 3 of us could likely have overcome it together, but apparently, I wasn't worth their life-risking effort. How ridiculous. The close friend I persistently tried to save could abandon me at any moment. Such is human nature. I died again, not just in body but with an exceptionally cold heart. Back in bed, I hugged my partner and cried hysterically for several minutes, mourning my tragic friendship, and then continued to flee amidst his astonished gaze. This time, I didn't seek out Chloe but instead secured the presidential suite at the top floor of a building. I gathered a huge pile of supplies from the supermarket, telling the hotel staff I was planning a party the next day and that no one should enter without my call. I closed the heavy bronze doors of the presidential suite behind me, gasping for breath. With only an hour or 2 to prepare, where could I go? Once out of the city, where would I find refuge? Remembering the zombies' terrifying strength and keen senses, I didn't expect the bronze doors to hold them off for long, and being trapped inside, I would inevitably run out of water and food. All I wanted was a quiet place to survive a few more days, gather more information, and organize my thoughts. At least I could plan and prepare better for the next escape, no longer flitting about like a headless fly, without guns, and unable to purchase enough sleeping pills. Surviving is hard, and dying neatly is just as difficult. Each time being bitten to death felt like undergoing purgatory over and over, with despair and breakdown just a step away. That's why I chose a room on the top floor of the hotel, thinking that if I were cornered by zombies, jumping from the small balcony would be less painful. At 2 a.m., standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows and looking down, I could see more and more people desperately running in the streets. Cars collided in the distance, emitting eerie flames. The Star Hotel's windows were so well soundproofed that only a faint noise could be heard. Due to the pneumonia epidemic, the hotel's occupancy rate was not high, so for the first time, I cried myself to exhaustion and fell asleep, oblivious to the situation outside. Suddenly, there was a violent banging on the door, which made my scalp tighten. Miss Scarlett, please open the door. Please let us in. There are monsters outside. I had miscalculated. Hotel staff had access cards to use the private elevator to the top floor, and some knew I had stocked up on supplies, so it was no surprise they would flee here. I heard 2 beeps, signaling someone outside was using a MasterCard to unlock the door, but I had already locked the door from the inside and wedged it shut with the back of a chair. Gritting my teeth, I was torn inside. 5 or 6 minutes had passed. It seemed there were no bitten people outside. Should I let them in? If they kept knocking like that, they would eventually attract zombies, and I feared the bronze door wouldn't withstand an onslaught of so many zombies. Zombies are too ferocious. It's hard to survive alone. Should I try banding together for survival? Even if I lose, I'd have a chance to start over, so it's worth a try to save a few people. So, I gritted my teeth and removed the barricades, but just as I opened the door, the elevator doors also opened, and several zombies rushed out, clawing at the elevator doors. There was also a person lying in the elevator. bloodied and twisted beyond recognition. It was bad luck. My heart clenched. It was too late to close the door. 6 or 7 men and women outside screamed desperately, pushing open the door and leading in zombies like demons from hell. Save me, please. A waiter bitten on the ankle fell to the ground, desperately crying and clutching my legs, his fingertips digging into my flesh as painfully as being torn by zombies. Under the cold night wind on the balcony, I ultimately couldn't jump, and once again became a feast for the zombies. My flesh was torn apart, and just before closing my eyes, I watched myself being disemboweled. Damn the idea of banding together. I really brought this on myself. Despair and intense pain gradually devoured my sanity, and tightly closing my eyes couldn't escape the bloody and horrifying demonic faces. I could only madly resist in vain. No, get away, stop. What are you doing? A man's angry shout came. Yet again, there was the ambiguous light. The comfortable big bed, the faint aroma of alcohol mixed with the sweaty scent, everything so enchantingly tempting. The man's face, however, looked terrible. He had several bloody marks on his face and exposed shoulders, which were shocking to see. But I'm back. Finally, I had returned from that terrifying place. Each time I felt myself sinking into hell, this man would appear. Seeing him, I knew the pain was over. At least this cycle of death was. Tears suddenly fell like a torrential downpour, quickly wetting the pillow beneath me. I couldn't help crying again, this time not wanting to stop, ever. The anger on his face slowly faded, and he carefully let go of my hands, somewhat at a loss. Did I hurt you, or are you having second thoughts? I shook my head desperately, crying so hard I couldn't catch my breath. Forget it. If you don't want to, just say so. I won't. The man thought I was regretting and resisting fiercely. So he started to get dressed, thinking of leaving. In panic, I threw myself at him, clinging tightly around his waist, pleading, "Don't go, stay with me, please stay with me." His strong heartbeat and the warmth of his body proved he was a real, living person, the only lifeline I could grasp as I was on the brink of collapse. Am I a fool? After all this turmoil, I haven't lived any longer, actually. Those first 3 hours I stayed by his side were the most peaceful, indeed. Just like the first time, he didn't leave. Instead, he leaned back against the headboard, spread his arms, and let me cry into his chest without minding the tears soaking his shirt, even handing me tissues. Only when my crying subsided to sobbing did he speak, heartbroken. "It's not worth it for such a man." I was slightly startled, taking another tissue from him. Before my first rebirth, he had said the same. That time, I had indeed been crying over a worthless man, but not now. After several cycles of life and death, some people had faded into insignificance, yet this man, whom I thought was a stranger, had become the object of my current desire. Yeah, you're right, but it's not about romance that I'm breaking down. He was right. It's not worth it for someone unworthy. Curled up in his arms, I greedily enjoyed this moment of peace, feeling very reassured. "You looked really scared just now," he said. "What if I told you I just had a terrible nightmare? Would you believe me?" After wiping away my last tears, I looked up and noticed the scratches on his skin, bleeding slightly, and quickly apologized. He frowned lightly and said, "It's just a scratch. But is sleeping with me what caused your nightmare? All right, it was me who indulged in alcohol and dragged him to this room, and then I had a nightmare while he was so involved. That must have felt incredibly insulting to him." "No, it's not that. I'll explain in a moment. Let me get some medicine first." It was an awkward moment. I hurriedly dressed and called room service for antiseptic and other medical supplies. Then while applying the medicine, I detailed the cycles of rebirth I had just gone through. As I spoke, I tried to control my emotions, but my trembling hands, holding the cotton swab, betrayed my fear, perhaps fearing to trigger another breakdown. He didn't express disbelief this time. He listened quietly as I described my last moments being devoured by zombies. Then he picked up his phone. "It was 1:19 a.m. You said at 2:50 a.m. a waiter will burst into our room, attracting zombies, and then you'll get bitten and turn into a zombie, and bite me. You've been through many cycles of rebirth, sometimes turning into a zombie, sometimes being killed outright, and each time you wake up at 11:53 a.m. He succinctly repeated the key points I had told him, and I nodded in agreement. When we entered the room, we were both drunk, went straight to the point, and even forgot to lock the door, which otherwise wouldn't have allowed the waiter to easily swipe and enter for help. The man got up, started browsing videos and checking the news on his phone. The internet still seemed calm, but after a quarter of an hour, looking out from the 30th floor window, we could see chaos starting to erupt on the streets. Videos and comments about zombie attacks began appearing online. The outbreak of the zombie virus quickly became a trending topic. My heart, which had barely calmed, clenched tightly again, and I unconsciously hugged my arms. "It looks like this city is the epicenter of the virus," the man said gravely. At that moment, he had no choice but to believe. Indeed, I didn't know where the virus came from, but only after the outbreak in Pingmo City, where we were, did news of zombies start spreading online everywhere. It was clear that this area was among the first to experience the outbreak, and it was widespread, affecting the surrounding regions. He tried to make a call on his phone, but no one answered on the other end. Then, turning to me, he asked, "Why can you keep coming back to life?" "I don't know. If I'm doomed, I'd rather die once and for all, than die horribly over and over again. I'm really going insane." I clasped my head, overwhelmed once again by the horrific images flooding my mind. If anyone says you get used to dying, or that you stop fearing pain after enough of it, I'd be profoundly grateful. I was both terrified and furious. What did I do to deserve this? Why has fate chosen me to endure this endless torment? After all, my boyfriend cheated on me, my best friend abandoned me, I might as well have gone to see my parents sooner. Why must I live through this bloody, terrifying apocalypse in such unbearable pain? Heaven must have given you these chances to come back for a reason. It shows you are unique, definitely important to this world. The man suddenly spoke, gently prying my hands apart. "Tell me, do you want to die or do you want to live?" he asked. I was startled, then looked up to see the seriousness in his eyes. "I want to live. I don't want to die again." I nodded emphatically. "Right, as long as there's a sliver of hope. Who would choose death?" "Good. Remember, my name is Ryan. I'm 29 years old. A lighting designer, and I run a lighting design company. My new cloud password, for 68169. When you see me next time, tell me these details straight away, and I'll take you to my friend's Nine Creeks Villa for refuge." "Got it," he said solemnly. "A place of refuge." I was overjoyed, silently repeating the information until I had memorized it. Then I nodded vigorously. Then Ryan said, "There's no way out if we stay here. Let's go. We need to try more ways to survive." "Yes, okay." Maybe next time I would have a chance to survive, to escape the bone-deep despair and pain. Looking at the man before me, my will to live was reignited. At 2:03 a.m., we took the elevator down to the lobby, only to find it overrun. Waitstaff and passers-by were being bitten and torn at by zombies, their screams echoing amidst the shocking crimson all around. The light shining through the hotel's clear glass facade continuously attracted more zombies, their speed comparable to sprinters in a 100-meter dash. Upstairs, spotting zombies sprinting towards us, Ryan grabbed my hand and we dashed back towards the elevator. We had just risen half a floor when a thunderous bang sounded from the elevator doors below. The base of the elevator shook, and I gripped the handrail tightly, my heart skipping a beat. The strength and speed of these zombies mean that the chances of an ordinary person escaping them head-on are very slim. Listening to the zombies smashing through the elevator doors below and their eerie howls as they fell down the shaft, Ryan's expression grew grimmer, his body tensing up even more. Indeed, I felt that aside from a slightly longer mutation period, these zombies were only slightly less formidable than the strongest ones in World War Z. The virus has already spread outside. It's definitely tough to move on the ground now. However, there's a helipad on the hotel rooftop. Let's head up and see if we can wait for an aerial rescue. Ryan decisively made the decision, and I had no objections. Ryan's company was responsible for designing and installing the exterior lighting and the helipad of the hotel, so he led me straight to the rooftop entrance. However, the entrance was secured with an access control lock, and Ryan had to use a fire axe to break open the door. Soon after, panicked guests and staff began running up, eventually attracting the zombies. Everyone desperately held the door against the zombies, but the door couldn't withstand their frenzied battering, and eventually, the rooftop also fell prey to the rampaging zombies. There was simply nowhere safe in this city. Ryan and I stood on the edge of the 35th floor, the lights of fires twinkling below us, screams tearing through the night sky. The cold night wind fluttered my skirt, making me shiver. I glanced at the time one last time. It was 2:46 a.m. The height here will make it less painful. Don't be afraid. I'm here with you. His warm palm pressed against the back of my head, his arms tightened around my waist, and my vision went dark as I was locked in Ryan's strong embrace. The roar of the zombies was inches away, with the chilling sweep of their claws brushing my bare legs, causing my hairs to stand on end. In the last moment, I tightly wrapped my arms around his waist and fell with him from the 100-meter-high building. The sound of wind rushed by my ears, my head dizzy from the lack of oxygen as I slipped into unconsciousness. But being tightly held in his embrace, I wasn't so scared anymore. This time, I didn't scream. A slight pain from a gentle bite on my neck and the faint, familiar scent of the man brought me back from my dizziness, knowing he was now in high spirits. I really wanted to immerse myself further, but I couldn't delay any longer and had to push him away. "Stop, get up first." But he seemed not to hear me, still trying to remove his last piece of clothing. To survive this time, I bit down hard and forcefully pushed him away with my knees. "Ryan, stop and listen to me." He suddenly looked up at me, his face shifting from obsession to shock. "How do you know my name?" Ryan's gaze sharpened. I quickly grabbed the blanket to cover myself and hurriedly explained, I just came back from a rebirth after a zombie apocalypse. It was you in my past life who told me your name is Ryan. You're 29 years old, a lighting designer. You just changed your cloud password to 468169. You also said you would take me to Joshi Villa for refuge. Such jumbled information was obviously hard to accept. And Ryan was clearly shocked and confused, but time waits for no one. I got up to get dressed quickly. Don't just stand there, we need to leave. The zombie virus will spread soon. I'll explain in detail on the way. I checked my phone. It was 05 a.m. I really couldn't waste any more time. Picking up a coat from the floor and throwing it to him, I said anxiously, can we just pretend I want to change locations? I really don't want to be bitten to death by zombies over and over again. What's your name? He suddenly asked, staring at me. I'm Scarlett, 25 years old, a professional illustrator. I got heartbroken last night, so went to a bar to drown my sorrows. Then I saw you and thought you looked nice, so I approached you. I've died many times. Ryan finally accepted what I was saying. As he listened to me quickly recount the events, he got dressed neatly and was ready in no time. Your story is quite incredible, but I believe my password, which I just changed and wouldn't be known by anyone unless I told them myself. So for now, I'll trust you. Tell me, what do we do next? We need to get as far away from the city as possible, I said decisively. Before long, we were in his SUV parked outside the hotel, speeding along the normally quiet streets. The time was 12:20 a.m. I recounted my experiences of being reborn several times and summarized the characteristics of zombies again. Zombies are incredibly strong and fast. Once they charge, the impact is terrifying. And typical household security doors and windows can't stop them, I explained. Moreover, zombies have exceptionally sharp hearing and smell. The only way to kill them is to shoot them in the head. A slight bite or scratch from them can infect a human with the virus, which takes about 2 to 5 minutes to cause mutation. Zombies prioritize biting in crowded places. If there's no one else around, they might start devouring a person, I continued. Also, large, noisy groups are not suitable for survival, so it's best to avoid moving in teams. Nearby towns aren't safe either. And ordinary vehicles can't keep zombies out. These insights were bought with my own tragic and bloody experiences. Listening to me, Ryan looked serious. He first called his parents to make sure they were vacationing on an island and urged them not to return to the mainland. Then he called a friend and got through immediately, receiving a password. It turned out his friend was about to attend an important meeting, which is why he hadn't answered the phone last time. After hanging up, Ryan said, the security at Joshi Villas is good, but the building has just been renovated. Except for electricity and water, there are no supplies. If we want to survive there, we'll need to bring everything: food, drink, clothing, everything. Since it was the middle of the night, there was no place to buy clothes or bedding, but we were close to my home, so we took a detour there. We arrived at my building at 12:42 a.m., moving quickly to avoid any zombies. Once inside, I quickly changed out of my dress into outdoor sportswear and running shoes, then packed up the bedding from my bed. Ryan efficiently filled a large suitcase with various necessities: laundry supplies, toilet paper, towels, a rice cooker, snacks, canned food, fruits, vitamin tablets. One suitcase was not enough. He eventually pulled out a bedsheet from the cupboard, using it as a wrapping cloth to make a big bag full of supplies. Seeing the capacity was enough, I also found a clean sheet in Chloe's room and packed my own clothes into another full bag. Realizing there was no place prepared for Ryan's clothes, I also packed some of Blake's jackets and trousers. Then we locked up and left. It was 1:06 a.m. when we drove out of the complex and headed to a 24-hour convenience store to raid for food and daily necessities. Ryan handed the clerk 30,000 yuan without waiting for each item to be scanned, just moving everything directly. We emptied the necessary shelves, even clearing out the storage room, until Ryan's large SUV was completely full. You better close up and go home. Don't do business tonight, I advised the clerk, having already raided his store several times before. Just as we were leaving, I suddenly heard someone loudly calling me, Scarlett. Buying so much stuff in the middle of the night, I stopped and looked towards the voice. Under the streetlight nearby, there was Chloe, one arm hooked through Blake's, the other waving high at me. She held a large bouquet of roses, smiling happily, completely unaware of the fast-moving, stumbling shadow with one arm missing, rushing towards them from behind. Watch out behind you, run. My heart tightened, and I couldn't help but shout a warning to them. Chloe and Blake turned around in surprise to look. The man was merely 10 meters away from them, his ferocious and hideous face clearly visible under the streetlight. Ah! Chloe screamed in terror. Blake reacted quickly, grabbing Chloe and trying to run, but in high heels, Chloe couldn't run fast. In an instant, a zombie pounced on her ferociously, and her screams, accompanied by splattering blood, echoed through the street. Seeing this, Blake was so frightened that he let go of her hand and ran for his life. Meanwhile, the young man from the convenience store, hearing the commotion, rushed out without understanding the situation, attempting to help. "Don't go." My eyes welled up with tears as I quickly reached out to stop him, but the young man didn't heed me. "Get in the car." Ryan had already started the car and was shouting at me. As I saw Blake running towards us, I took one last look at Chloe, who was struggling in her last moments. Clenched my teeth, turned around, and hurried into the passenger seat, slamming the door shut. "Scarlett, wait for me, wait for me." In the rearview mirror, I saw the convenience store guy get tackled, and Blake nearly grabbed the rear car door but was thrown off as Ryan floored the accelerator. The face of terror and anger flashed by and then disappeared from the rearview mirror. I knew he wouldn't survive. It was a pity about the young man. In the end, I had abandoned them too. I closed my eyes, took a couple of deep breaths, and forced the tears back, clenching my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my flesh, causing pain. "Don't worry, I won't leave you behind," Ryan suddenly said. I turned to look at him. His expression was solemn, and I slowly relaxed my grip. The car's display glowed. 1:36 a.m. An emergency broadcast interrupted the radio. It was early morning, and the streets were nearly empty. The virus hadn't yet spread widely. Ryan drove fast, and soon we were out of the city. We sped along, passing car accident scenes without daring to stop for the cries for help. As we drove through a small town, a zombie suddenly charged at us head-on. "Run it over. Don't stop the car," I yelled, gripping the handle above the passenger seat tightly. I remembered the scenes where cars had been stopped only to be smashed and overturned by several zombies, which made me break out in a cold sweat. Ryan hesitated for only a moment before slamming down on the accelerator, with a loud bang. The zombie was flung away, and the front of the car was heavily dented. At the same time, another zombie suddenly leaped from an overturned car at the roadside, coming straight at us. Then another thud. The zombie's head shattered the passenger side window. The mixture of red and white fluid smeared across the window, and I had to bite my lip hard to keep from vomiting. Luckily, Ryan's car was sturdy. If it had been my economical sedan, the glass would have probably shattered instantly. But if we endured a few more hits like that, even the SUV wouldn't hold up. With their terrifying strength, these fearless zombies were a formidable force. More zombies appeared one after another ahead, but thankfully, Ryan's driving skills were excellent, and the road wasn't blocked. He calmly maneuvered the car in an S-shape, effectively reducing some of the impact and sending several zombies in the dark night flying away. It wasn't until we had completely shaken off the zombies chasing us that I finally let go of the handle, realizing my palms were sweaty. After about half an hour of driving, we smoothly made our way to the mountains, turning onto a small road amidst dense woods. Soon, we saw a fenced area of about 500 to 600 square meters in the forest, with a 3-story building in the middle. Kyle is a physics genius, specializing in quantum mechanics. Recently, he went abroad with a government group for an academic exchange. He enjoys the tranquility, so he insisted on building a house alone in the mountains. "Let's go inside first, and he'll contact me after his meeting is over," said Ryan as he opened the gate to the yard and drove the car into the garage. He took out his phone to check the time. It was already 3:25 a.m. We finally made it out of the city alive, and I couldn't help but sigh with relief. After getting out of the car and seeing the body of the car covered in dents and stained with blood, I felt a wave of fright. We entered the house through the small door in the garage and moved the supplies upstairs, trip by trip. The hard furnishings inside were already completed and cleaned. However, there were few pieces of furniture, and the whole house was empty, with some leftover decorating tools tossed in a corner. Fortunately, the kitchen and bathroom were fully equipped. After setting down our things, we first pulled down all the curtains and blinds on the first floor to check for security and to ensure no one outside could see inside. Then Ryan led me to the study, where he pressed a seemingly normal spot on the custom-built bookshelf, revealing a hidden keypad. I was amazed and widened my eyes. There was a secret mechanism. After entering the code, a row of bookshelves silently opened up to reveal a security door about 10 centimeters thick, with stairs leading downward behind it. Kyle likes to quietly work on his experiments, so the security is excellent. There's also a lab, storage, and a separate bathroom downstairs, though it's all empty now, Ryan explained, but the house's water and electricity can operate independently, and there's a satellite phone, radio, and full house surveillance video set up in the basement. The doors and windows are soundproofed and blast-resistant, so they should hold off a small number of zombies. Ryan showed me around, detailing the structure of the house. His phone rang at that moment, and Ryan quickly answered. "Kyle, we've arrived at Jiroshi Villa. How are things on your end?" "Ryan, I'm glad you're safe. The infection has been found abroad as well. I'm about to evacuate with the embassy staff and head back to the country to a secure base. I'll try to arrange a helicopter to rescue you guys once I'm back." Kyle's voice was breathless, clearly running and speaking urgently. Ryan quickly asked, "Do you know how the zombie virus started?" Kyle, being a nationally recognized physicist, might have access to information that others don't. It seems that the KB organization overseas released a biological virus in several major cities around the world at the same time. This primitive virus spread through water sources. After a certain period, people with susceptible constitutions begin to mutate and become poisoned. After mutation, the virus transitions to being spread through bodily fluids, infecting everyone. There is no vaccine yet, nor any immune individuals, so the situation is very severe. We need to prepare for a long battle. I need to handle some procedures. I'll contact you when I'm free," said Kyle, amidst a noisy backdrop. "Wait, let me ask one more thing. If a person could repeatedly resurrect at the same time and place after death, do you think that's possible?" "I remember you once mentioned a related theory," Ryan asked loudly. Hearing Ryan's words, my heart tightened and I listened intently. Resurrection. The most likely scenario would be finding a time loophole coordinate to reset. That's exactly what I've been researching independently. No one has succeeded yet, but theoretically, it's possible. A lot of big shots laugh at me, saying I'm chasing fantasies. "Why do you suddenly ask?" Ryan glanced at me, hesitated for a moment, and then said, "Just curious. When you have time, let's discuss it in detail," he said. Something stirred inside me. Was he trying to protect me, afraid that I would become an experimental subject? "Just curious." Kyle sounded puzzled over the phone. Then amidst a burst of noise, someone shouted his name, urging him to hurry up with the procedures. "I'll get back to you as soon as I'm on the plane," Kyle yelled, then hung up. I let out the breath I had been holding, but then excitement surged through me. So, Ryan actually had such an incredible friend. Then what was all that about me repeatedly running out and getting devoured alive by zombies? No wonder he believed my sci-fi story of rebirth after I shared Ryan's personal information. It seems there was a reason fate brought me to him. Thank you, Ryan. Although Kyle said he wasn't successful just now, it doesn't mean he won't be in the future. Perhaps my rebirth was because of him. If we know the principle, there's hope for liberation. In short, I really don't want to go through death and back to life again. Of course, if I could keep living like this, that would be the best solution. At that moment, I finally felt that hope was limitless. We waited for Kyle to call again. But even by dawn, there was no ring. Ryan tried calling him, only to get a "cannot connect" message. My heart sank again, and I shared Ryan's worries. Had something happened to Kyle? As dawn broke, several zombies appeared outside the yard, constantly growling and violently hitting the gate and walls. Not good. Could it be that the car accidentally hit a person or an animal, leaving behind a trail of blood that attracted the zombies? Ryan and I had the same thought and hurried to the garage to check. Sure enough, we found a bloody black puppy corpse hooked in the gap of the dented rear bumper. It was too dark and rushed last night. None of us noticed. Just as we were about to clean up the corpse, the garage door suddenly made a loud bang and was dented in. Startled, I stumbled and fell to the ground, my heart clenched tightly, instantly unable to breathe. The zombies had entered the yard. "Run." Ryan quickly picked up a steel spike from the ground and pulled me towards the small door of the garage. Bang. Bang, bang, 1, 2, more and more dents appeared on the garage door, growing larger. We hurriedly shut the small door tightly, and Ryan grabbed a nearby paint can, splashing half a bucket of paint onto the door. We then heard a loud crash as the garage door was knocked down. Ryan pulled me along, running to the study on the other side. Seeing that the zombies hadn't attacked the small door, we finally dared to breathe a sigh of relief. We looked at each other, hearts pounding. We couldn't enter the garage, and with 7 or 8 zombies wandering in the yard, we were trapped. In the following days, we had to be extremely careful inside the house, fearing any noise might alert them. However, we still couldn't get in touch with Kyle. Days later, many cities had completely fallen. News reports indicated that the zombie virus was spreading outward from several major cities, with the military struggling to defend, steadily losing ground. The same disaster was unfolding worldwide. The zombies' combat and infection abilities were too strong. If the virus spread couldn't be controlled, it would soon be the end of humanity. Gradually, external communications networks broke down, the weather grew colder, and our spirits heavier. We've tried contacting various local emergency services through satellite phone, but none of the calls went through. The radio did announce the addresses and contact numbers of survivors' bases, but unfortunately, they were all far from us. Even after we managed to contact a base, they could only suggest that we find our own way there. From the sporadic radio broadcasts, we learned that one by one, the survivors' bases on land were being destroyed. Fortunately, the island base where Ryan's parents were located was still intact. However, later their mobile signal was lost, and we lost contact with them too. Ryan and I had considered escaping, But being in one of the regions where the virus originated, there were hardly any survivors left around us, not to mention any rescue options. Outside were only zombies with overwhelming strength, and getting trapped by them meant slim chances of survival. But what if we don't hear from Kyle? Our supplies will soon run out. Then what? This house is our fortress protecting us, but it's also a prison with nothing left inside. During this agonizing wait, the temperature in the mountains quickly dropped below zero. I only brought one set of bedding, which we spread on the solid wood floor of the study, each of us sleeping on one side. Initially, we slept distantly like the demilitarized zone, politely and clearly separated, but one morning when I woke up, I found myself curled up in Ryan's arms. He didn't push me away. Instead, he held me tighter, careful not to let the cold air seep in. Gradually, I got used to waking up in his arms, accustomed to his companionship in this cold, hopeless world. As time swiftly passed, we've been trapped here for 46 days. Waking up in the morning and peering through the slit in the curtains, I saw heavy snow falling outside. The air was bone-chillingly cold, and I really didn't want to leave Ryan's warm embrace. We only have enough food for 2 or 3 more days, and Kyle probably won't call or send help. Ryan, kill me. Let's start over. His body tensed noticeably. After a moment, I was pulled into his chest, feeling our heartbeats pounding louder and louder. You said you didn't want to die again, his voice low and slightly bitter. I looked up at him and smiled faintly. Yes, I'm afraid of pain. I don't want to die, but dying one more time is for a new hope. Don't worry, I brought painkillers from home. It won't hurt this time. I really dislike when the game level gets too high and having to restart from the beginner village, but being able to start over, isn't that also a kind of fortune? At this point, I'm thankful I can be reborn, starting everything over, though there's always a faint unease and regret in my heart, because he will forget me, and won't remember any of these hard days we've spent together. Although we lie together, warming each other, he has never made a more intimate move, instead being somewhat cautious. But the more he does this, the more my heart flutters. I admit, I've become greedy, initially coveting his body, his looks. Now I also covet his heart, but I'm really useless, having died so many times without any progress, unable to save our lives. Once we're reborn and successfully escape, I must confess to him. That's what I was thinking. Then shortly after getting up, due to the stress, my long-delayed period finally began. The noses of the zombies outside are much sharper than a dog's. Soon, they became agitated and swarmed toward the house, screeching and slamming into the glass and walls. Even more terrifying was that their howls could attract even more zombies. Even if I hid in the sealed basement, the zombies outside didn't disperse, but at least they were less restless. When I go back after being reborn, contraceptives are essential. If that doesn't work out, tampons are better than sanitary pads. After rebirth, we need to outpace the spread of the zombie virus and head straight for the island base before it spreads completely. The dangers on the road are many, and the chances of survival outside are slim, but I still have a chance to fight. If it doesn't work out the first time, I'll keep trying, and if all else fails, I'll die and start over. In any case, I'm determined to fight until I can survive with him. I'm not afraid of dying again. I made up my mind quietly. Once I memorized all the information and escape routes from the radio and handed Ryan the steel spike, then, grabbing a handful of painkillers, I bravely said, taking too many painkillers will knock me out. Just aim straight for my heart so I won't feel a thing. Let's do this. Ryan's veins on the back of his hand bulged, his chest heaving more intensely than mine. As I was about to swallow the pills, my arm was suddenly yanked away. No, I can't kill you. I don't want to forget you. Scarlet, there's still a chance. Let's wait. Maybe we'll think of another way to escape. Maybe if we hold on a few more days, Cal might bring help. Ryan dropped the spike and gripped my shoulders, pinching them painfully. I opened my eyes in surprise, my heart beating wildly. Could it be that he might have feelings for me? Just then, the satellite phone in the basement suddenly rang. Could it be Kyle? We exchanged a glance of wild joy. Ryan snatched the pills from my hand and rushed to answer the phone, but after just a few words, the smile that had just appeared on Ryan's face froze. He looked at me, his eyes slowly reddening. All I knew was that it was Kyle's assistant on the line, and he said, "Kyle is dead. What happened?" I asked cautiously after a while. As Ryan hung up the phone, he missed the first flight back to the country by just a step. He and a few other scientists from our country were kidnapped by local agents. It took our country more than a month to negotiate their return, but Kyle was attacked by zombies there on the way back. Ryan choked up and stopped. It was the first time I saw tears in his eyes. Once the zombie virus outbreak began, the veneer between nations was ripped apart. It seemed that scientists had become a valuable resource coveted by all countries in this apocalyptic world. Now, the apocalypse seemed to be a man-made disaster caused by everyone scrambling for resources. During his captivity, Kyle never stopped thinking about rescuing Ryan. His assistant called Ryan as soon as he escaped. I understood the pain Ryan felt losing his close friend. I stepped forward and rubbed his shoulder, comforting him. Don't worry, we still have a chance. When I go back after being reborn, I'll have you call Kyle immediately. Tell him he must catch that first flight, suddenly. Ryan hugged me tightly, so tightly I almost couldn't breathe. Scarlett, you can't die. From the moment you survive 3 hours, you can't be reborn again, and neither can Kyle come back to life. Wow. I was utterly stunned. Owen has been working on projects with Kyle and is also an expert in quantum physics. Although he can't solve the difficulties of time reversal, his theories are clear. It was mentioned. He just said that the first time a person dies in reverse time, rebirth is a critical node. If the time of the first death is linked to the point of rebirth to form a circle, no matter how many times the reborn person dies and is reborn within this circle, and no matter what different events occur in between, the future remains unchanged. For example, if you are reborn about 3 hours before your first death, those 3 hours form a circle, as long as you die within those 3 hours. You will always be reborn at 11:53. Everything and everyone you've changed, including the whole world, will revert back to their original state. But now that you've lived past those 3 hours, you've stepped out of that circle and drawn a new timeline that didn't exist before, and you can't go back to that rebirth point. You've changed your own fate and that of others connected to you. This is a one-way straight line. Once it's broken, just like any ordinary person. Hearing Ryan explain this, it took me a while to grasp the reality. So, if I just endure those 3 hours, I would have broken the vicious cycle of life and death. But when I want to die, I can't. And when I need to be reborn, I can't come back to life. Should I be happy or despair? What should we do next? Owen said he tried to request help from the base. Don't worry, we'll find a way to escape, Ryan said solemnly. I knew he was trying to comfort me. Now, with severe shortages in manpower and firepower, and survivor bases continually being overrun by zombies, why would the authorities waste resources to rescue 2 insignificant people deep in a virus-infested area? If Owen's words were so effective, he wouldn't just say he'd try. Unless I report that I am a rebirth, would I then become a subject of experimentation, or once again a prisoner of time? The mere thought of not being able to control my own life or death made me shiver. If that were the case, I'd rather die, but thinking about the last few bags of instant noodles and snacks, I knew we couldn't wait any longer. Maybe you should tell Owen about my rebirth. Perhaps the base will take it seriously and send help sooner, I suggested. If Kyle were still here, it might be worth considering, but he's gone, and all the scientific data was destroyed. If someone really takes an interest in your rebirth, they might use you as a subject for repeated experiments. And I can't let you be treated like a lab monkey. Ryan hugged me again, holding on for a long time. It's all my fault. If I hadn't held him up with endless questions that day, he could have made the first evacuation flight, and we could have escaped. Ryan's voice was filled with despair. My nose tingled with sadness. But how could I blame Ryan? It was because he wanted to ask Kyle about my rebirth that we were delayed. Now that Kyle is dead, the chance of me being reborn again might never come. And we are trapped here with only death awaiting us. With tears welling up in my eyes, I wrapped my arms around Ryan's waist and said softly, "It's not your fault. Kyle would definitely want you to live well. I don't want to drag Ryan down with me. If it could secure his chance of survival, I'm willing to make that call. Perhaps this is the meaning of my rebirth. At least I can save him, and there is still hope for us to live." Suddenly, I felt a cold sensation beneath me. I had a bad feeling, reached down, and touched, just as I feared. My period had started. I had thought I might be reborn back, so I hadn't brought a new sanitary pad down. This time my period was delayed for quite a while, and when it came, it was unusually heavy. All I could do was blush and tell Ryan, who didn't hesitate to go fetch some things for me. As soon as we opened the sealed safety door of the basement, the zombies outside, visible through the surveillance cameras, became restless and started banging on the walls and windows. Damn it, this apocalypse is really unforgiving for women. I hurried into the small bathroom, locking the door tightly behind me. The basement was empty, devoid of any furniture, and the cold, icy floor was not suitable for sleeping. The upstairs, however, was relatively safe, and it was convenient to retreat to the basement in case of danger. So we had been sleeping on the solid wood floor of the study. No, I couldn't just give up. I had to continue finding ways to survive. On the days of my period, I dared not leave the basement. After Ryan brought me the sanitary products, he went to fetch the bedding and other necessities. Changing my underwear and sanitary pad wasn't enough. I also needed to change my thermal pants and quickly wash off the bloodstains. Ryan, I need to change my thermal pants too, I said awkwardly. Knocking on the bathroom door, "I'll gather the laundry, just stay inside, I'll wash the dirty clothes, don't worry about it," he said from outside before hurriedly running off. We only had 2 sets of thick clothes to change into, and I had just washed 1 set yesterday, because it was cold and damp, and we dared not open the curtains on the first floor. The clothes were hanging to dry in a south-facing room on the second floor. For now, I could only remove my blood-stained thermal pants. rinse them in the sink to dilute the blood, and shiver as I waited for him. Soon, I faintly heard a loud boom from the surveillance cameras outside. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly pulled on some cleaner outer pants and ran to check the monitors. The scene almost stopped my heart. The house's walls and windows were quite sturdy and the zombies hadn't gone completely berserk, so they were holding up, but to my horror, somehow a zombie had managed to climb onto the beautiful tiled roof of the small attic on the third floor and had smashed a hole through it. It was now roaring as it charged downward. The world had gone mad. Our house, which had no burglar bars or anything that could aid zombies in climbing, somehow still had a zombie make it to the roof of the third story. Seeing Ryan holding clothes and just coming downstairs, desperately running back, sent a cold sweat down my spine. I picked up a steel spike from the ground and ran to the stairs. At the basement door, I saw a small, fierce zombie lunging towards Ryan, who had just dashed into the study. As its filthy, sharp claws were raised high, my mind exploded in panic, and I screamed, "Ryan!" The zombie suddenly turned towards me, its deep red, murky eyes glaring menacingly, like a devil eyeing a blood feast. "Get back!" Ryan shouted at me, using the moment the zombie paused to rush forward and tackle it by the waist. Flipping it onto the ground, he was risking his life to save me. In that instant, I snapped back to reality. I saw Ryan, his arms wrapped in clothing to fend off the zombie's sharp teeth, his face flushed red, his jacket already torn in several places by the zombie's claws. The zombies outside were furiously banging on the window. Without a second thought, I rushed forward and plunged the spike into the zombie's head with all my might. Kill it. Save Ryan. I was in a frenzy. 1 stab, 2 stabs. Dark, filthy blood and yellow, foul-smelling brain matter splattered everywhere. "Let's go." Ryan struggled to his feet, tightly gripping my arm. Only then did I snap out of my fear and madness. The glass continued to resound with thuds, and the frenzied howls of zombies outside were terrifyingly close. I hastily dragged the head-blasted zombie to a bookcase, hoping to mask our scent. Then Ryan pushed me into the room and staggered back a few steps himself. "Come on, get in here." I anxiously turned back to look at him. Ryan was gasping for breath, his body trembling, yet he stood frozen in place. Suddenly, it felt as if a needle had violently pierced my brain. I rushed to him, frantically wiping the blood that smeared his head and face. His pale face bore no wounds, neither did his neck, but when I tore open his tattered down jacket, I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. His apricot sweater was ripped in several places, soaked in a glaring, fresh red. "It's all right. It's all right. Not all zombie scratches lead to infection," I said, shaking my head desperately, trying to suppress my uncontrollable sobs. "He couldn't die, couldn't turn into a zombie." I hadn't even had the chance to tell him I liked him. Ryan's eyes were also red as he slowly lifted his right hand. The sight of a flesh-torn bite mark below his wrist shattered my last hope. I felt all strength drain from my body, the world around me turning bleak. "I'm sorry, Scarlet. I can't stay with you anymore. Call Owen. You must find a way to survive. Find my parents. Take care of them. Go now." His once bright black eyes turned increasingly bloodshot. It seemed he had much more to say, yet no chance to say it. "Ryan, I like you. Don't leave me, Ryan." My vision blurred with tears. I held him tightly and refused to let go, but he pushed me ruthlessly, mercilessly, into the basement. Then the heavy door closed, sealing away all my hopes. At the same time, the sound of breaking glass came from outside. I tumbled down the stairs, pain piercing through my limbs, but I struggled to climb up step by step. He had promised never to leave me. It couldn't be. It's just death. I'm not afraid of dying, but I fear never seeing him again. The sound of heavy pounding came from outside the door, my tears unstoppable. My trembling hands struggled to press the door lock. But just as I was about to open the door, I stopped abruptly. "No. I am a person capable of rebirth. I absolutely cannot give up." Wiping away my tears fiercely, I stumbled back to the basement. I needed to call Owen, tell him I could be reborn, get the base to send someone to rescue me. Although Kyle was gone, if other scientists knew there really was a person who could be reborn, they would surely study this direction and try to change history. So what if I had to be a lab monkey? What if the chances of success were slim? As long as there was even a slight hope, I must go back to save him. Finally getting hold of the satellite phone, I looked up at the camera monitor in the study, and was instantly stunned. In the surveillance video, 6 or 7 ferocious zombies were smashing around a bookshelf, and there was Ryan, standing behind them with bloodshot eyes. Completely ignored, I covered my mouth to stifle my sobs, but I couldn't hold back tears of joy. Persisting really did mean there was no insurmountable path. Then I saw him pick up a steel spike from the ground, forcefully plunging it into a zombie's head. One by one, the zombies fell, none resisting. Soon after, the basement door reopened. Ryan slowly came down, removing his ruined clothes to reveal many ragged and fierce wounds. His eyes still held a trace of bloodshot. but they were clear and bright. He smiled at me, showing his big white teeth, unbearably handsome. I rushed to him and held tightly to his still warm body. I will never let go again. Did I just hear someone say they like me? Ryan said, holding me tight. I nodded desperately, but I was too choked up to speak. What a coincidence. I was just about to say, I like you too. His gentle voice entered my ears, and my tears gushed out like a breached dam. Soon after, Owen received a call from Ryan and was ecstatic. 3 days later, the government sent a helicopter rescue team. The vaccine production technology was quite mature. The only thing missing was safe antibodies from immune individuals. There were immune individuals, but all were infectious. Only Ryan was not only immune with the necessary antibodies but also safe, with Ryan's blood as a culture medium. A zombie antibody vaccine was soon mass-produced, armed with the antibodies. Soldiers could freely move among and pursue zombies without fear of attack. Humanity finally launched a major counterattack, with Ryan hailed as a hero who saved humanity. 3 years later, the world announced the elimination of the last zombie. That day, Ryan and I went to Kyle's grave to lay flowers. Brother, thank you. You are the real hero who saved the world. End of main text. Extra. That day, I drank too much and felt terrible, ignoring the host's displeasure. I left the private room early. A fresh-faced girl suddenly appeared, shaking her head and asking me, "Hey, handsome, do you have a girlfriend?" Her clean, straight black hair draped over her shoulders, her eyes red and swollen, clearly having cried for a long time, perhaps to drown her sorrows. "Please get out of my way." After a brief glance, I sidestepped her. She looked a bit hurt, bowed her head slightly, and staggered back without another word. For some reason, after walking a bit, I couldn't help but look back. I saw a man jokingly trying to chat her up. She tried to leave after rejecting him, but the man laughed and reached out to pull her, only to receive a slap from her. Seeing the man about to lose his temper, I suddenly felt very annoyed, stepped forward quickly, and pushed the man away. "I don't have a girlfriend. Would you come with me?" I said to her. Her eyes, red and blurry with tears, looked at me with surprise. Then she nodded frantically. It felt like I had picked up a pitiful little kitten. At that moment, I felt something tugging at my heartstrings, so, amid the man's cursing, I wrapped my arm around her shoulders and left the noisy bar. Initially, I just wanted to prevent her from getting into trouble or being taken advantage of by men, planning to be the good guy and take her home. But I think I overestimated myself, busy with work, and having not touched a woman since breaking up with my ex-girlfriend 4 years ago. Sitting in the car watching her curl up beside me, I suddenly felt an uncontrollable urge. Perhaps it was the indulgence of alcohol, or maybe I had been single for too long. I couldn't stop myself. If she hadn't suddenly pushed me away, I really would have plunged in and not wanted to wake up. Later, the zombie crisis really did erupt, and I was glad I believed her words, allowing us to escape in time to the Joshi villa. I thought Kyle's connections would bring help soon, but he suddenly lost contact. That month was agonizing. I worried about Kyle and didn't know where hope lay for me and her. She never mentioned that night again. Sometimes I think, maybe I was just a momentary cure for her heartbreak. If it weren't for this zombie crisis, we might have each gone our separate ways. Yet, it might also mark the beginning of our shared destiny. There's this inexplicable feeling, as if she has cried in my arms many times, and at times reacted with the startled ferocity of a wild kitten. Each time, I find myself moved by compassion and stirred by emotion for her. She lacks a sense of security and is timid, yet she is strong, she is emotional and has her own principles. Everything about her is so clear. I've realized I like such simple, straightforward girls. I can't help but want to protect her. However, in these apocalyptic times, I dare not promise to keep her safe, as I'm unsure of her feelings and hesitate to overstep. If we can escape safely, I would definitely tell her that I like her, even if it's the end of the world. I hope to be by her side till the end. Although I know she can be reborn, I don't want to see her suffer again, nor do I want these days together to be erased from my memory. Fortunately, she didn't take the medication, or I would have been driven to despair. After being bitten, it felt as if my body was thrown into boiling oil, torn apart in agony, driving me to the brink. I finally understand the pain she has endured time and again. I'm sorry. I can only protect her one last time, hoping she never has to endure such unbearable pain again. Glancing at my phone, it's 2:50 a.m., so I asked Owen, who after some thought, nodded solemnly. Perhaps in 10 or 20 years, other scientists might discover a method to change history, allowing us to bring Kyle back to life or even prevent the zombie apocalypse from occurring. As long as we persist, miracles can happen, right? Through Owen, I learned about finding the time coordinates that can reverse time and resurrect people, akin to finding a needle in a haystack within the capacity of a supercomputer to create a highly complex antivirus program. Theoretically, any ordinary person can be reborn at these time coordinates, provided their body's magnetic field matches the loophole. Besides spatial coordinates, We cannot choose the time coordinates or the carrier, the person who can be reborn. Thus, if someone is reborn, it's not because they are special, they just happen to be the right carrier for those specific time coordinates. Then, I roughly figured out why Scarlet was reborn. The first time Scarlet bit me, my immune constitution allowed me to survive being bitten and thus live among the zombies after developing immunity. I would then call Kyle immediately to explain the situation and tell him the specifics and location. Knowing I'm immune, he would definitely find someone to rescue me quickly and rush back to the country, catching the first flight home. However, I might have had an accident later, not surviving until the rescue, while the zombie vaccine remained undeveloped. Eventually, Kyle found the time loophole coordinates set for that night at 11:53 p.m., with the spatial coordinates set to the hotel where I was. He intended for me to be the one reborn. It was a gamble, a matter of human fate, dependent on whether my body's magnetic field could match that moment. Clearly, I wasn't suitable, but fortunately, Scarlet, who was in my arms, had a body magnetic field suitable for rebirth at that moment, so she became the one who was reborn. That night, Scarlet finding me was fate arranged by the heavens. She was an angel sent by God. Now, looking at the woman sleeping sweetly beside me, the unfinished business of that night, we have a lifetime ahead to slowly settle.